Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we're about to begin shortly. A kind reminder to please take your seats. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished participants, will be beginning in 2 minutes, so please kindly take your seats. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the second day of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. Yesterday was a powerful reminder of the collective strength and commitment driving our fight for gender equality. From high-level pledges by governments and key stakeholders to thought-provoking discussions at the side events, we witnessed an inspiring display of collaboration, innovation, and determination. The launch of the Regional Synthesis Report was a significant moment, offering a clear roadmap to accelerate progress and fulfill the promises of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. As we move into today's sessions, let's carry forward this renewed energy to drive transformative change for women and girls. To start the day, let's take a moment to reflect on the highlights from yesterday. Please enjoy this short video capturing the impactful moments and discussions that set the tone for our work ahead. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed those wonderful highlights. Now I please pass the floor to the chair of the meeting. Thank you.
A very good morning to all distinguished delegates. Welcome to the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. The meeting is called to order. I now invite the meeting to consider Agenda Item 3, thematic discussion on the achievements, challenges, gaps and emerging issues in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and platform for action and key actions for their further implementation in Asia and the Pacific. The documents pertaining to this agenda item are ASCAP/MCBR/2024/2, ASCAP/MCBR/2024/3, and ASCAP/MCBR/2024/4. We will have thematic discussions on the achievements, challenges, gaps, and emerging issues related to the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and platform for action and key actions for their further implementation in Asia and the Pacific. These thematic discussions will also inform the Chair's summary. Each thematic discussion will feature a roundtable discussion to introduce the topic and inform the discussions. Following each panel, I will then open the floor for interventions. Given the numerous speaking requests the Secretariat received, the roundtable panels have been shortened from 45 to 30 minutes. The statements for roundtables C and D in the afternoon will also be continued to further save time. I have been working hard with the Secretariat to ensure we have time for as many interventions as possible and kindly request for cooperation in sticking to the 3-minute limit. We will also post formal statements on the website of the meeting. In the end of the fourth round table, we will consider the draft decisions contained in document ASCAP-MCRB/2024/2 and ASCAP/MCBR/2024/3. We will take up Agenda 3A, Advancing Women's Economic Empowerment through Employment, Decent Work, Social Protection, and Entrepreneurship. The first roundtable discussions will be moderated by Mr. Srinivas Tata, Director of the Social Development Division at ASCAP. May I please ask the moderator and the panelists of the first roundtable discussions to take their seats in the soft chairs. Mr. Datta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency the Chair. I have the honor to moderate this first roundtable under Agenda Item 3A, which will be focusing on advancing women's economic empowerment through employment, decent work, social protection, and entrepreneurship. I'm very honored to have a panel of 4 distinguished panelists and who are from a mix of both from government as well as civil society. We are missing our 4th panelist from Pakistan who couldn't make it, but however, she has sent her best compliments, and I'm sure our 3 remaining panelists will be able to discharge the areas and give their views on the areas that are covered by this agenda item. In the interest of time, I will introduce the panelists as we go along, as I hand over the floor to them. We will have 1 round of questions, and I will have, the panelists will have 5 minutes to respond to them. And this being an area of extremely high relevance, I will be asking each one of them to address a different aspect of this issue so that it lays a strong foundation for the discussions to follow. So without much ado, I would like to start by addressing my first question to Ms. Xu Huang, who is the Deputy Director General in the Office of the National Working Committee on Children and Women of the State Council of China. Ms. Huang will speak in Chinese. My question to you, Ms. Huang, is China has undertaken a wide range of initiatives to support women's economic empowerment through employment, decent work, and entrepreneurship. What are the key strategies and policies that China has adopted to support economic participation of different groups of women, improve gender-responsive social protection, and enable women to thrive in STEM careers and the digital economy, which is particularly important? Over to you, Ms. Huang.
Thank you, Dr. Tatar, for the questions.
Yeah.
And I'll change my mind and I'll speak in English.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, China has adopted a holistic approach to support women's economic empowerment by introducing laws and policies in fostering a conducive environment, implementing inclusive financial initiatives, conducting massive training for women's capacity building, and delivering programs tailored to women's special needs and different groups of women. Firstly, China revised the law on the protection of women's rights and interests, which introduced articles on the supervision and inspection of gender equality in the entire process of employment, including but not limited to interviews, on-board, training, promotion, job rotation, and reassignment of positions, and etc. Articles also include establishing a mechanism of calling for joint meetings by relevant agencies with the employers of reported and complaints of gender discrimination. The incomplete statistics shows that between November 2022 and August 2023, 230 such meetings were held to address gender discrimination of the employers. And there are also articles on holding employers accountable for sexual harassment in the workplace and constituting public interest litigation of discrimination against women. And secondly, in inclusive financing for women's entrepreneurship, we have expanded women's access to finance through preferential policies, including lowering the threshold of credit, simplifying credit procedures, uplifting loan ceilings, and providing financial products, insurance products, and services tailored to women. The Central Bank of China has developed guiding principles for commercial banks to innovate financial products serving women's entrepreneurial activities. Insurance institutions worked out adaptable insurance clauses for women entrepreneurs at different stages of their business development. For example, for startups and micro enterprises, insurance is low cost but accurate in coverage. For female online shop owners, insurance covers the delay in delivery and data leakage. Other products provide women entrepreneurs with insurance if their intellectual property, patents, or trademarks are violated. Thirdly, we promote lifetime vocational training, and each year, over 8.5 million women receive government subsidy in vocational training. We also give priority in enhancing women's digital competence in the training, strengthening their capacity in e-commerce and safety awareness on the internet. Massive open online courses have been developed to the different needs of women. Training on e-business and live stream sale are very popular in China. China Women's Development Foundation and the Ant Financial have implemented a cooperative project which provides training on AI data labeling to women from underdeveloped areas to promote their employment. For special groups such as female university graduates, female migrant workers, and disabled women, we help to link them with the labor market. We provide guidance in job hunting and employment, hosting job fairs, and establishing business startup funds for female graduate students. Labor and Social Security departments carry out projects that integrate employment information, employment opportunities, and legal awareness raising. For migrant workers, China has developed the 14th five-year program for the protection and development of disabled persons and the 5-year plan of employment promotion for people with disabilities from 2022 to 2024. Disabled persons-owned businesses enjoy tax deduction or exemption and enjoy priority in government procurement. In engaging women in STEM study and STEM career, China has taken various measures. Schools work with science and tech museums in science popular education. Female astronauts give lectures from the outer space. Projects on science empowering girls and plans on the nurture of female scientists have been carried out. All these endeavors aim to cultivate girls' interest in science and technology and prepare them to engage in STEM careers. With this, I thank you, Dr. Tata.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Huang, for that really comprehensive and multifaceted strategies that China has pursued for enabling the economic empowerment of women, including in new contexts such as digitalization and AI. And thank you so much for keeping perfectly to time. Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Ms. Trinh Thi Huang, the Deputy Director General in the Agency for Enterprise Development in the Ministry of Planning and Investment in Vietnam. Ms. Huang, when women start businesses, they create income for themselves and generate potential employment opportunities for others, including for other women. Based on your ministry's work in Vietnam, what specific strategies and policies have been adopted in Vietnam to improve the ecosystem for women's entrepreneurship, including emerging sectors such as green and digital businesses?
Thank you very much, Dr. Tata, and good morning, everyone. I'm very honored and very happy to join this very meaningful event. Actually, yesterday, I'm so impressive and very inspired by the very great initiatives and the strong commitment and determination of other countries. And thank you very much, ESCAP, for inviting me to join this roundtable and share with you what the Vietnam government is doing to support the women entrepreneurs in Vietnam. In Vietnam, most of the 5 million household business managed by women. They are the key force to generate jobs, improve the income for the people at the bottom of the pyramid, especially the people in the rural and remote area. So the Vietnam government, we strongly support the agenda of women economic empowerment. We understand that is the approach we can achieve inclusive growth in my country. My agency, my ministry is a Ministry of Planning and Investment. We are the focal point ministry in charge of the social and economic development in Vietnam, as well as the enterprises development. So we mainstream the women economic empowerment in our work. We understand that the women empowerment and gender equality is not the own story of the Women Commission or Women Ministry. It's the inter-ministerial stories. And it's the national agenda, it's the global agenda, and it is the whole story of the whole society. It's not only one ministry. So we are the ministry in charge of the social economic development and enterprises development. We already focus on 3 key drivers. The first one, we improve the legal framework that foster the women entrepreneurs. The second one, we focus on provide capacity building program to improve the competitiveness of the women entrepreneurs, especially for women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises in Vietnam. And the third one, very important, is to strengthen the business support organization network to create an enabling ecosystem that supports women entrepreneurs in Vietnam. So recently, with the technical support from many departments, from many development partners like ESCAP and UN Women, ADB, USAID, we already achieved some remarkable results in improving the ecosystem in Vietnam that fostering the women entrepreneurs. And for example, in the legal framework, we already conducted several researches on like a woman with the COVID impact, woman with the agri-tech, a woman in climate change, and based on that, findings and policy recommendation, we improve our SME support law. In SME support law, we put more specific and stronger incentives support the women-led micro, small and medium enterprises in my country. And for example, we support 100% training costs and consultant fees for the women-led MSMEs. Meanwhile, other main MSMEs receive only 50% of the support. And in terms of the capacity building, we support the women entrepreneurs in ICT, in digitalization, in green transition, access to finance, and access to market. And with the BSO, the Business Support Organization, we provide capacity building for them in terms of the policy advocacy, skill and technique, so help them to can give the government more specific and more feasible recommendation. So, and also we train them in terms of the M&E, in terms of like a policy review and monitoring, for example, like this. So those efforts already contribute remarkably to help us to create enabling environment for women entrepreneurs in Vietnam, and to help the women-led SMEs to become the drivers for the inclusive and sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wang, for updating us on these very encouraging progress in Vietnam. The mainstreaming of gender into ministries of SME and your leadership in this has been very vital. I think so. We look forward to continuing this conversation, I'm sure. Last but not least, we also have on our panel Ms. Anna Lee Tavera, the Director of the Gender Equality Activities of the International Trade Union Confederation of Asia and the Pacific. Anna, when it comes to women's economic empowerment, it's not just about creating jobs. It's creating quality employment and decent work. From your perspective, what are the priority issues that still need to be addressed in relation to decent work for women in our region, including in the context of the growing care economy and the digital and the platform economies which are also emerging? And by what means could women have their voices and interests represented in dialogues and negotiations with regard to decent work? Over to you, Anna.
Thank you for that question, and very good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to bring the collective voice of over 60 million workers across Asia Pacific, and that voice represents hope, resilience, and aspiration for a just and equitable future of all. For countless women, this ministerial conference represents not just a meeting, but a real opportunity to improve their lives and lift their families out of poverty. While I'm attending this conference, I'm reminded of very powerful stories of women across the region, particularly when we celebrate the International Day for Care and Support. We have heard stories of women and their strength, but also the systemic exclusion, inequalities, and missed opportunities. One story that I would like to share with you is a story of Shilpi Bigun from Bangladesh. She's a 35-year-old widow, a mother of 2 daughters whose life was forever changed because of the violence that claimed the life of her spouse. She shares, "I work day and night without rest, but still not enough to give my daughters the future they deserve. I dream of a life where my work is respected, where I earn a fair wage, and where I don't have to fear harassment in my community and the homes where I work. But how can I have rights when my work as a domestic worker is not even recognized?" So Shilpi's struggles are not isolated. They mirror systemic challenges exacerbated by inadequate absence of laws, policies, and systems that risk undermining the hard-fought progress of the past 30 years. And to the question, building women's economic resilience is not just about creating jobs. Truly, it's about fostering decent work that uplifts women, transforms societies, and strengthens economies. So to realize this mission possible, I would like to highlight 3 key priorities and the actions required to bring this to life. The first one is addressing the persistent decent work deficits. The findings of the review lay this bare, exposing persistent and large gaps that trap women and their families in cycles of poverty and precarity. We must resist with determination the systems and structures that perpetuate these deficits, whether they manifest in the form of unequal pay, unsafe working conditions, violence and harassment, discrimination, and the undervaluation of women's labor. To reclaim the promise of a future where every woman enjoys dignity and equity in the world of work, we must uphold and protect the centrality of decent work and take decisive action to make this a reality for women, for all workers. The Philippines' ratification of C-190 this year is one classic example of what we can achieve when governments, employers, and unions come together with a united purpose. But ratification is just a beginning. It should be a foundation upon which we will make sure that the right to a world of work without violence and harassment is not just an ideal, but an experience and live reality for workers, for women, for young people, for LGBT workers, and other gender diverse individuals. Which leads me to the second point. We don't have to look too far to see the promise of progress lies. The care economy holds an immense potential to create decent jobs, sustainable economic growth, and foster gender equality, which are precisely the key ingredients of building a just and equitable future. Yet it remains undervalued and disproportionately reliant on women's unpaid and poorly compensated labor. Women like Shilpi, who has been tirelessly caring for other people while aching to support their own families, is exactly the reason why we have to make this transformation. Unions are deeply committed to reshaping the care economy from one driven by profit to one centered on the right to care, the right to self-care, and the dignity of care workers and the people they care about. But to be able to unlock the potential of these two, it is essential to have women at the table where decisions are made. However, meaningful engagement and leadership must be supported by an enabling environment when women can advocate for themselves. Unions remain the strongest vehicle for this, providing them with the tools to organize, collectively bargain, and ensure the voices are not only heard but heeded. We have seen firsthand the transformative power of women in leadership. ITU-CAP has reached the historic gender parity in our regional General Council. It's a governing body last year. And because of that, women's issues are no longer sidelined. They are being actively addressed. And just last month, our governing body has established and really provided the strong support for the establishment of the Women's Leadership Fund, which is an initiative to replicate and sustain efforts for equality in the movement. And just to conclude, these demands and aspirations, they're not new, but will define this moment, how boldly and effectively we respond. So addressing the deficits of today, lay the groundwork for decent work of tomorrow, jobs which are climate-friendly, anchored in rights, and rooted in dignity, while also challenging the unequal gender division of unpaid care worker. But in order to achieve this, we need more than a new set of promises on paper. We need clarity on how these commitments will be intentionally and deliberately transformed into bold, decisive action in meaningful collaboration with all of society, including the world's largest democratic movement, which are the trade unions. But I just want to end with these questions to all the people in this room. To every government represented here, we asked, are you ready to match the determination and courage of women like Shelby? Are you ready to take bold steps needed to fulfill the full promises of Beijing Declaration, Agenda 23, and international labor standards? Because we are. The trade union movement is ready to work with you to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your passionate espousing of how you're going to achieve the agenda for decent work for women in the evolving and dynamic context of our region. It was so important to hear the voice of the trade unions. Well, we had initially planned for 2 rounds, but there is such overwhelming interest from member states to contribute. So we'll be ending with 1 round of questions. And I believe our panelists have successfully set the stage for the discussions to follow. They provided as an opportunity to reflect upon the progress, challenges, and key future actions. And I'm sure we're going to hear from the contributions both during this roundtable and others, because they're all interrelated, on what needs to be done to sustain growth and to maneuver megatrends such as demographic shifts, climate change, and digital and technological transformations while keeping women at the center. So thank you very much. Can I ask for a round of applause for our panelists for doing such a great job within the limited time given to them. So I have now the privilege of handing the floor back to the chair, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Data. Panelists and discussions for this interesting and enriching discussion. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I will now open the floor for country statements, as we have limited time for intervention, considering that there are 3 round tables to follow. I would like to urge all speakers to strictly adhere to the time limit of 3 minutes. Delegations called upon will speak from their seats. The Secretariat has received speaking requests, and we will also call on governments in the room who raise their flag. I will first open the floor to statements from members, associate members, and observers countries. I will then invite statements from intergovernmental organizations, United Nations identities, and civil society representatives and stakeholders. I open the floor for statements.
I now invite the distinguished delegate of Marshall Islands.
I now invite the distinguished guests for the Marshall Islands and delegates.
Esteemed Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of the Marshall Islands wishes to contribute to this thematic discussions on advancing women's economic empowerment. Frequent and rapid onset of disasters resulting from climate change has impacted businesses, particularly small-scale women-led businesses in both the formal and informal sector due to pre-existing challenges and discriminations that they already face. Extreme weather events such as droughts and storms, results in inundations have devastated our lands and marine resources, drastically affecting production and sales, impacting women and their families to get their basic needs, access services such as healthcare, and in some cases, results in violence and abuse. As in many of our nations, COVID-19 posed many challenges for promoting women's economic empowerment. With the existing climate change challenges, COVID-19 compounded economic challenges with the closure of our borders and delays in transportation and movement of goods in both within the Marshall Islands as well as between the Marshall Islands and abroad where products were sold and or exported. However, in efforts to address the challenges of COVID-19, online marketing became an emerging activity for our craft and food producers in the city centers, as well as more remote and rural areas. Access to technological devices, internet connectivity, and the knowledge and skills on the use of these technologies and online spaces are important to continue to support our women in their economic opportunities beyond our shores. The Marshall Islands has been able to advance women's leadership and women's economic empowerment through several initiatives. The government of the Marshall Islands has established a multi-sectoral Women Economic Empowerment Task Force, chaired by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Commerce, mandated to promote women's economic empowerment, increase access to improve affordability of economic opportunities for all women and girls, and strengthen coordination, collaborations, and partnerships between entities implementing WEE in the efforts of the Marshall Islands. The task force offers workshops of gender financial management skills, as well as looking for grants and other avenues to promote small businesses in all areas. The convening of the first ever Pacific Women's Leadership Coalition paved the way for the establishment and mobilization resources for the Karai Inamkil Fund program, a non-governmental-led initiative focused on women's economic empowerment. Karai Inamkil program, a Marshallese proverbs on women's intellectual and beneficial creativity, was made possible with a $1 million grant from ROC Taiwan, which was initiated by Her Excellency Dr. Hilda C. Heine in her previous tenure as president, to provide small to medium loans to women and girls to encourage entrepreneurship.
Please, Mr. Marshall, I'll wrap up.
Thank you. Well, como dada, and thank you very much for your time.
I invite the distinguished delegate of Timor-Leste to have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a post-conflict country, there are many challenges that priorities to be tackled by Timor-Leste, and the country is committed to advancing women empowerment, gender equality, and social inclusion since the restoration of its independence in 2002. Gender equality, women's empowerment, and social inclusion is at the center of our country's development. The Ministry of Social Solidarity and Inclusion is one of the key ministries that provides key services and intervention to victims of gender-based violence, which the majority are women and children. Provision of safe places or temporary shelter for women and children provides accommodation to victims of violence up to 5 years. When the risks of family and community reintegration are high, victims continue to stay under the care of the government through our implementing partners. Our technical team, who are the case managers, provide ongoing support to the victims' access to justice, including attending court hearings, as well as ensuring counseling and humanitarian support. Economic empowerment and livelihood activities are not only being provided to victims of gender-based violence, but also to youth groups and persons with disability. There are currently about 4,000 beneficiaries of women and children, including persons with disability. MSSC is also committed to implement the Mobility Declaration, planning and budget allocation to empower and support women in the most in needs in rural areas. in order to ensure vulnerable families such as single-headed family households, single parents, parents with disability, parents who live with chronic illness and other social economic challenges. The government provides a minimum of $8 per month and a maximum of $10 per month for child, depending on their level of education, and additional $5 per month for a child with disability. This program has benefited around 70,000 children from more than 34,000 legal guardians or parents. For tertiary education scholarship, the government provides $300 biannual grants for students with disability, a partnership between the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Social Solidarity. Currently, there are about 25 students with different types of disabilities, including students with vision impairments and deaf students have benefit. The Ministry of Social Solidarity and Inclusion is also planning another interministerial collaboration with conditional cash transfer to support marginalized and vulnerable pregnant and lactating women with children up to 2 years of age, integrating specialized nutrition food as part of this conditional cash transfer to contribute to the reduction in malnutrition and stunting in children, which rank at the moment 47%. Ladies and gentlemen, Timor-Leste is slowly progressing, advancing its development programs and striving to achieve SDG as well as other national and international commitments. To ensure that plans and budget are responding to these commitments, 4 budget-sensitive markers have been established and measured. Next year, Timor-Leste will introduce a disability-sensitive marker into government annual action plans and budget. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished Delegate Timor-Leste. I invite the distinguished guest of Brunei to have the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished Chair, Excellencies, and fellow delegates, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for the opportunity given to engage in this important conversation on advancing women's economic empowerment. Brunei Darussalam have made meaningful strides towards fostering gender equality, particularly in the areas of workforce participation, social protection, and entrepreneurship, 3 key pillars that hold the potential to transform the lives of women across the Asia-Pacific region. The foundation of our efforts began with the 2009 Employment Order, a key piece of legislation that ensures women's rights and protections in the workplace. This law guarantees paid maternity leave, which has been increased to 105 days in 2011, almost double from the previous 56-day allowance. This legal framework plays an important role in supporting working mothers, enabling them to balance family responsibilities without fear of losing income or employment. On entrepreneurship, yesterday I shared regarding the strong support available in Brunei for women entrepreneurs through various initiatives, including training, financial grants, and microcredit financing provided through government and non-government agencies. In addition, there are also specific programs done in collaboration with private sectors targeted for vulnerable women, especially single mothers, by providing them with entrepreneurial opportunities, including by growing businesses from home so that they may be able to continue looking after their family. Beyond economic empowerment, social protection remains a critical element of our strategy to support women. One of our significant initiatives is the Care Provider Allowance, which offers financial support to caregivers, many of whom are women caring for elderly family members or individuals with disabilities. This allowance acknowledges the immense value of unpaid care work and reduces the financial burden on women caregivers, enabling them to engage more fully in the workforce and society. At the heart of our social protection efforts is the National Welfare System, a digital platform launched in 2020 that streamlines the application and distribution of welfare assistance. By consolidating welfare programs, including monthly allowances and educational support for low-income families, it has made it easier for vulnerable groups, including women, to access the assistance they need. As of today, almost 29% of the active beneficiaries under the system are women, especially single mothers, widows, and caregivers, highlighting the system's importance in addressing gender-specific needs. As we look ahead, we must recognize that advancing women's economic empowerment, improving social protection, and ensuring decent work for all women are not just policy goals, they are imperatives for building a more resilient, inclusive, and prosperous society. The efforts we make today will shape the workforce of tomorrow and contribute to the broader goal of achieving gender equality in the region. As policymakers, leaders, and advocates, it is our shared responsibility to ensure that every woman has the opportunity to thrive regardless of her background or circumstances. Together, we can build a future where women have equal access to economic opportunities and supported by comprehensive social protection systems. This is not only a goal we must strive for, it is a future we can create. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate, Malaysia, to have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Under the current economic framework, the Malaysia government sets the target to increase women's participation in the workforce to at least higher than the current more than 5% in 10 years. As part of this commitment, the Employment Act 1955 has undergone progressive amendments to safeguard women's rights in the workplace. Key measures include protections against the termination of pregnant employees, and extension of maternity leave from 60 to 98 days for all female employees, 7 days of paid paternity leave for married male employees, flexible work arrangements, prohibition on the employment discrimination, and amended for employers to raise awareness on preventing sexual harassment. On the front of social protection, Malaysia is steadfast in alleviating the burden of domestic responsibilities, particularly for the housewife. The introduction of the Housewife Social Security Act 2022 has granted access to crucial insurance benefits such as healthcare coverage and financial assistance. We also recognize the vital role of entrepreneurship, especially for the women navigating post-pandemic recovery, and the government has provided soft financing targeted at women entrepreneurs, contributing to a national statistic where women now own more than 20% of the SMEs. One of the critical parameters for us to advance towards economic empowerment is that on the creating inclusive opportunities for women at all levels of society. With that, I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Nepal to take the floor.
Honorable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to participate in this roundtable on advancing women economic empowerment. This platform provides a valuable opportunity to evaluate progress, confront persistent challenges, and chart a course toward a more inclusive and equitable future for women and girls in Asia and Pacific. Honorable Chair, women's economic empowerment is the foundation of gender equality and sustainable development. It is the top priority for Government of Nepal, which is committed to ensuring equal access to economic resources and promoting women's participation in decision-making at all levels. Our strategic focus includes expanding access to economic resources through banking and microfinance programs, cooperatives, and interest-subsidized loans to promote women's entrepreneurship. Additionally, we are enhancing social safety net to ensure that women, especially those in the informal sector, have access to maternity benefits, pension, health care, and childcare services. Nepal's thriving microfinance sector has also been instrumental in empowering women entrepreneurs, especially in rural areas. There are currently 5.99 million members in 77 microfinance companies, with 96% of members being women. Microfinance institutions provide small loans without collateral, enabling women to engage in small-scale businesses. Moreover, the President Women Employment Program provides marginalized women with skill training and entrepreneurship support, promoting self-reliance. The implementation of BPFA in Nepal has achieved notable progress, but it has also encountered significant challenges. Several factors have influenced both success and shortcomings across the critical areas, reflecting solutions to improve gender equality as well as the obstacles that remain. Insufficient funding for gender-specific initiatives and weak institutional framework undermine the effective delivery of services designed to economic empowerment of women. Economic disparity has further intensified gender inequality. Women are heavily concentrated in the informal economy, facing limited access to credit, entrepreneurship opportunity, and leadership role in financial institutions. To address these challenges and accelerating progress, Nepal firmly believes that multilateral cooperation and partnership are crucial. Collaboration with international organizations, development partners, and private sector and civil society have strengthened institutional capacity and ensured that gender-responsive programming reflects global best practice, says, where addressing local realities of economic empowerment of women. In conclusion, Nepal envisions a society where every woman can realize her full potential, free from poverty, discrimination, and inequality. By uniting our efforts, we can build a more equitable and resilient future for women and girls around the world. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate to take the floor from Iran. And I invite the distinguished...
Just wait. It looks like the distinguished delegate of Iran is not ready, so we move on to Thailand. That's what you said.
The distinguished guest for Thailand is not ready. So
Iran.
And we'll move on to the distinguished delegate of Thailand.
Excellencies, on behalf of the government of Thailand, I am honored to join this crucial discussion and to share Thailand's effort in advancing women's economic empowerment through employment, decent work, social protection, and entrepreneurship. In terms of employment and decent work, Thailand has implemented several initiatives to enhance women's access to equality, employment, and decent work. Early childhood development centers have been established and children under 3, with extended hours to support working parents. Paternity leave for male civil servants has been introduced, and maternity leave has been extended from 90 to 98 days. Moreover, the first promotes skills development at Women and Family Development Learning Center and for Vocational Protection and Development Center has been established, offering training tailored to market demands. On social protection, Thailand has implemented the Child Support Grant provides monthly subsidies for children under 6 from low-income families. In addition, Thai women and girls are guaranteed equal access healthcare services under the Universal Health Coverage Scheme. Thailand is actively fostering entrepreneurship among women through collaboration with the ASEAN Women Entrepreneur Network or AWEN. We are facilitating regional knowledge exchange on economics, technology, and entrepreneurship. Also, digital skills training initiatives are empowering women to access in e-commerce and digital marketing, boosting their competitiveness in the modern economy. Despite progress, challenges persist, including unpaid responsibilities, wage inequality, and slower entrepreneurial growth for women. Addressing these requires removing barriers to quality employment, enforcing economic empowerment policies, safeguarding labor rights. We value ESCAP's support in tackling these challenges and offering practical recommendations. Promoting collective bargaining and social dialogue is key to achieve equitable treatment, ensuring women can thrive and contribute sustainable growth. Thank you. ขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the Russian Federation, followed by Papua New Guinea. The floor is yours.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. В современных условиях рынок труда претерпевает серьезные изменения. Это результат влияния на него целого ряда технологических, экономических, демографических и других факторов. В сложившейся ситуации особенно важно дать возможность женщинам формировать и совершенствовать необходимые профессиональные навыки на протяжении всей карьеры. Одним из ключевых направлений по повышению уровня благосостояния и снижению уровня бедности среди женщин является обеспечение их занятости. По данным Росстата, численность рабочей силы в возрасте 15 лет и старше в феврале текущего года составила 75,5 миллионов человек. Среди занятых доля женщин в феврале составила составила 49%. В России выстраивается целостная система подготовки специалистов. Она включает в себя как раннюю профессиональную ориентацию и получение востребованной в экономике профессии, так и возможность переобучения под запрос работодателя. С 2020 года в рамках национального проекта «Демография» во всех субъектах России реализуются мероприятия по профессиональному обучению и дополнительному профессиональному образованию отдельных категорий граждан, в том числе женщин. Обучение женщин организовано с целью расширения возможностей их трудоустройства, сокращения периода поиска работы и обеспечения наиболее качественной занятости. Профессиональное обучение осуществляется по профессиям и специальностям в соответствии с потребностью рынка труда или в соответствии с требованиями конкретного работодателя под гарантированное трудоустройство. Для женщин с детьми профессиональное обучение и дополнительное профессиональное образование способствует приобретению трудовых навыков и адаптации на рабочем месте, повышению конкурентоспособности на рынке труда и совмещению трудовой занятости с семейными обязанностями. Реализация мероприятий по организации переобучения осуществляется за счет средств федерального бюджета во всех субъектах нашей страны. В прошлом году обучение осуществлялось по 30 тысячам образовательных программ при участии более 900 образовательных организаций. Обучение женщин, находящихся в отпуске по уходу за ребенком, и неработающих женщин, воспитывающих дошкольников, осуществлялось по различным образовательным программам таких направлений, как менеджер по продажам информационно-коммуникационных систем, бухгалтер, специалист по интернет-маркетингу, специалист по управлению персоналом, менеджер продуктов в области информационных технологий, педагог, педагог дошкольного образования, парикмахер, программист, юрист, психолог в социальной сфере и многие другие. Популярность женского предпринимательства в России также растет, в том числе благодаря мерам поддержки национального проекта «Малое и среднее предпринимательство» и поддержка индивидуальной предпринимательской инициативы. По данным Единого реестра субъектов указанного проекта, на декабрь прошлого года число женщин, занимающихся бизнесом, составило 44% от общего числа индивидуальных предпринимателей и самозанятых граждан, то есть 13 миллионов единиц. Господин председатель, уверена, что обмен опытом... Let me finish, please. Уверена, что обмен опытом между государствами-членами СКАТа поможет найти наилучшие решения по улучшению занятости женщин. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Papua New Guinea, followed by Iran.
Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from Papua New Guinea. On behalf of the government of Papua New Guinea, it is an honor and privilege to share with you PNG's effort on advancing women's economic empowerment through employment, decent work, social protection, and entrepreneurship. Government of Papua New Guinea has strategically adapted to empowering women economically to better sustain their livelihood. The government is committed to providing equal employment opportunities, professional growth for qualified individuals regardless of gender or disability. It ensures that women and girls' rights are protected via social protection approaches to exercise and perform equal participation as their fellow male colleagues in the working environment, communities, and homes. In PNG, only 15% of the total population are formally employed and earn fortnightly income. 5% are into small micro enterprises, whilst 80% is engaged in the informal economy sector. Majority of these 80% are women, and therefore, Government of Papua New Guinea is trying its best to have the informal sector participants formalize their participation by registering their businesses in order to access bank loans to further assist them grow business. Besides from economic empowerment, there are other priority areas the government is focused on: women's leadership and decision-making, women and health, girls' education, women's training, gender-based violence, women in infrastructure, women and climate change, women and natural resource management, and an enabling environment. Papua New Guinea acknowledges and reaffirms our commitment to gender equality, including the Beijing Platform for Action, the Pacific Platform for Action, and all our international commitments, including CEDAW. To conclude, PNG calls for the involvement and engagement of our men and boys in advocating and addressing all the issues we have discussed, and have more inclusiveness of affirmative actions for our women, girls, persons with disability, and elderly to be more visible in programs and initiatives than mere words on policies and legislations. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Indonesia, followed by Iran.
Okay, thank you. Excellencies, I would like to commend the panelists for the excellent presentation. Indonesia is of the view that one of the most pressing challenges requiring immediate action is ensuring fair access and comprehensive protection for women in the world of work. In this regard, Indonesia continues to intensify its efforts, among others. First, the National Entrepreneurship Development Policy empowers women by providing access to essential capital, business development services, and mentorship. Second, the Indonesia's Roadmap for Care Economy 2025-2045 that includes 7 strategic priorities to drive joint effort in strengthening care policies, regulation, and infrastructure, and improve access to quality care services as well as welfare of care workers. Further, the adoption of National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change to solidify women's role and participation in green economy and the creation of green jobs and to mainstream women in climate action. Third, comprehensive regulatory frameworks to create a safe and conducive environment for women in the world of work through government regulation on equal pay for work of equal value, Minister of Manpower regulation on prevention of sexual violence, as well as our national health insurance program. Moving forward, Indonesia will continue its efforts through 8 vision Astacita and intensified collaborative partnership between government, the private sector, and civil society. Through collective action and strengthening partnership, Indonesia believes we can build a resilient and inclusive future for all women and girls in the Asia-Pacific region. To end, we have a question for the distinguished panelists and the floor. How can government, businesses, and civil society collaborate to create an integrated ecosystem that fosters women economic empowerment through sustainable employment, equitable social protection, and entrepreneurial opportunities? Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Iran, followed by Tonga.
In the name of God, ladies and gentlemen, greetings and respects. According to the Constitution, the Islamic Republic of Iran has prioritized the cultural, social, economic, and political empowerment of women and girls as a key element in national planning, legislation, and policy making. This is pursued across 3 strategic levels: education, empowerment, and skill development, and the creation of equal participation opportunities aligned with legal support. A. Education. The Islamic Republic of Iran, through its supportive policies, has guarantees free education at all levels for all citizens. As a result of these policies and their effective implementation, 90% of women between the age of 10 to 49 are literate, and gender gap in education, especially in primary and secondary level, has been nearly eliminated. Women now make up 46% of students in public university, 40% of uni faculty members, 60% of teachers, 24% of inventors. And they have equal access to a wide variety of academic disciplines. B. Empowerment and creating opportunities. Under the broader policies of 17th Five-Year Development Plan and law and removing barriers to women's growth and flourishment, the National Plan for the Development of Human Home-Based Business has been designed and implemented. Article 20 of Constitution emphasizes the equality for individuals under the law, ensuring that everyone benefits from equal legal protection without discrimination. Supported by this legal foundation, women now make up 45% of public sector and 74% of the private sector workforce. Moreover, 32,000 private sector employers are women, and 4,000 out of 10,000 knowledge-based companies in country are either managed by women and or women have a place in board of directors. In the startup ecosystem, for every 10 male entrepreneurs, there are 8.2 female entrepreneurs actively leading new ventures, and they have innovative ideas. For instance, at the 2024 BRICS Women's Entrepreneurship Summit, 4 Iranian women were among the top 26 entrepreneurs. Over that, women have business activities in
Thank you,
400...
distinguished delegate.
Yes.
I now invite the distinguished... I now invite the distinguished delegate of Tonga, followed by the United States of America.
Mr. Chair, Honourable Ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share about a new initiative for Tonga social protection called the Integrated Aged Care Project. For the first time, Tonga will implement a multifaceted approach to aged care, recognizing that aging involves physical, emotional, social, and psychosocial aspects. This is also a first for the Pacific region. With funding from the Asian Development Bank, the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific, and the Climate Change Fund, the Government of Tonga has commenced work on a project that aims to enhance the well-being and quality of life of older people in Tonga by providing appropriate, safe, and high-quality integrated health and care services and support to caregivers. There are approximately 3,300 older people, which accounts for 60% of which are women, suitable for community-based services. One of the outputs of the project is to ensure caregiver support and measures to recognize, reduce, and redistribute the caregiving responsibilities. We will pilot the provision of a caregiver allowance for informal family caregivers who are full-time for older people who need a high level of care, and assessing its sustainability, as well as training for caregivers to not only enhance the quality of care, but to also provide a pathway to formal employment. So this activity works to reduce and rebalance the distribution of unpaid care and domestic work by providing both financial and psychosocial support, and hence the project evaluation will include an assessment of the caregiver allowance, its sustainability, and the feasibility for scale-up. It is the hope that this will address the norms surrounding unpaid care work, which often place all responsibilities on women without adequate support or recognition, and promoting it as a viable career option, particularly for men. This work is in line with government's National Strategic Plan for Long-Term Care 2020 to 2024 in an effort to ensure proper care is in place for Tonga's elderly population. Tonga looks forward to sharing an update on the progress of this work in the future. Excellencies, I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of the United States of America, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. Removing barriers to economic security and empowerment for all women and girls around the world makes our economies more resilient, our communities stronger, and our nations more peaceful and prosperous. According to the latest World Bank Women, Business, and Law report, none of the 190 economies examined achieved legal gender parity in the areas measured. That means women everywhere face barriers to economic opportunities. The United States is committed to promoting women's economic security globally and at home by dismantling systemic and structural barriers to women's equitable participation in the economy. That is why we launched the first ever U.S. strategy on global women's economic security in 2023. We are taking the strategy's priorities forward through our work in the Asia-Pacific region, including through the Building Economic Inclusion via the Blue Economy Project, which enables local civil society and private sector capacity to support women's access to economic opportunities in the blue and green economies in Palau, Nauru, Tuvalu, and the Republic of Marshall Islands. The project works with women-led civil society organizations to address barriers women islanders experience with respect to market engagement and disruptions in the economy. In response to worsening climate impacts, including cyclones, drought, and sea level rise, the project prioritizes advancing equity through outreach to and in consultation with individuals from rural areas, marginalized racial, ethnic, and indigenous communities, and LGBTQI+ communities. Through projects such as this and others, the United States remains committed to advancing women's economic security here in the Asia-Pacific region and globally. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. We'll move on to the next statement. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Kazakhstan to take the floor.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as a gender expert and women's rights advocate, I am honored to share insight on Kazakhstan's journey toward gender equality and the challenges we face in empowering women economically. Despite being an upper middle income country with relatively low discrimination against women according to Gender Equality OECD Index, Kazakhstan faces significant barriers. Women make up 55% of the civil service, but hold fewer than 10% of top leadership roles. Despite nearly 100% literacy and the fact that more women hold university diplomas than men, traditional gender stereotypes confine many to caregiving roles and limiting professional growth. Economic empowerment is hindered by limited access to fair employment. Women comprise 48% of the workforce, but are overrepresented in lower-paying informal sectors and face 25% gender pay gap. Kazakhstan's resource-dependent economy exacerbates job scarcity due to limited diversification. During downturns, women are often the first to lose employment. To contribute financially to family income, many have more children to access social benefits that barely equal the minimum wage for 4 children. This has fueled rapid demographic growth, making Kazakhstan a demographic anomaly with high literacy rate and high birth rate. Without comprehensive gender and demographic policies, this demographic advantage may be wasted. SAIP research in 2022 identified sexual harassment as a significant barrier to women's employment. Introducing targeted penalties for sexual harassment as recommended in ILO Convention 190, which Kazakhstan has yet to ratify, would be a pivotal step towards safer, more equitable workplaces. Additionally, the lack of peer support and business networks hinders female entrepreneurship. Women represent 46% of entrepreneurs, but are mostly involved in low-profit micro and small businesses. A promising pilot program supported by the UN and ADB established 17 regional centers for women's entrepreneurship, but progress stalled after it ended. The absence of women's entrepreneurship as a legal term in legislation further limits access to dedicated funding. While these programs enhance entrepreneurial skills, they often focus on traditional roles rather than future-focused skills. Only international organizations and professional women's associations actively engage women in STEM fields, offering opportunities for flexible and sustainable careers. Recommendations. First, promote economic diversification. Advocate for strategies beyond resource dependency to create diverse job opportunities. Second, push for legislative change, ratify ILO Convention 190 and introduce women's entrepreneurship as a legal term to facilitate funding. Third, ensure safe workplaces. Implement policies and penalties addressing workplace harassment.
Please round up.
To ensure women can work safely and with dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Cambodia, followed by Philippines, to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegate, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Cambodia proudly reaffirms its commitment in advancing women economic empowerment as a crucial driver of inclusive and sustainable development, guided by the Kingdom Pentagonal Strategy Phase 1. We see employment, decent work, and social protection as an opportunity to innovate, collaborate, and uplift women all across the sector, driving transformative change. To achieve this vision, we are expanding access to quality education and vocational training tailored for women and girls. Our digital literacy initiative aims to empower 1.5 million youth from vulnerable and at-risk families with a focus on women or female participation. By equipping women with essential skills, we enhance their employability and promote economic development, laying the groundwork for sustained progress. Central to our efforts are the Decent Work Country Program, or what we call the DWCP, and the Decent Employment for Youth DEY initiative, championed by the International Labour Organization, ILO. This program builds equitable labor market, reduce gender disparity, and unlock economic opportunity for women. By providing young women with skill and clear pathway into a meaningful employment, we aim to strengthen resilience and boost economic contribution. Our commitment to gender-responsive social protection is equally crucial. Cambodia has expanded the Health Equity Fund for universal health care and institutionalized social protection measures to support citizens during the crisis, and initiatives such as care for elderly, maternity protection, and child care service ensure that working women, families are supported comprehensively. Furthermore, Cambodia's alignment with the Global Accelerator for Job and Social Protection for Just Transition, a United Nations Secretary General initiative, underscores our commitment to building inclusive, gender-responsive systems that empower women full participation in economic life. Together, through collaboration, innovation, and strategic investment, we can transform our shared commitment into a meaningful progress, fulfilling the Beijing Declaration and the 2030 Agenda, and empowering every woman to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I invite the distinguished delegate of Philippines, followed by Cook Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates. The Philippines has made significant progress in advancing gender equality, but some gaps remain. And to address this, we have established a social protection floor. This encompasses universal social security, cash transfers, and livelihood support to protect women and vulnerable groups during crisis and economic cycles. As a pathfinder for the UN Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions, we are committed to quality job creation and universal social protection. We are also addressing the disproportionate care responsibilities borne by women. Affordable and accessible care services are central to this effort. Also, some initiatives encourage workplaces to go beyond compliance by adopting women and child-friendly policies, including flexible work arrangements and enhanced benefits. The Caregivers Welfare Act is a recent legislation that protects the rights and welfare of caregivers, building on the Domestic Workers Law, which protects domestic workers from abuses and exploitation. We likewise reaffirm our commitment to safe and productive workplaces by ratifying the Convention on Violence and Harassment. Beyond national efforts, global collaboration is crucial. The climate crisis has hit our nation hard. This month alone, 4 typhoons have displaced thousands, many of whom are women and children. We call for urgent international action to achieve a just transition to a climate-resilient, low-carbon economy. This will not only prevent displacement, but also create green jobs for vulnerable groups. The Philippines stands ready for global cooperation on just transition, as this is what we are strongly pushing for at the ongoing 29th Conference of the Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We must also close the gender divide, the digital divide. This entails increasing spaces for women in STEM, enhancing their access to digital tools, and improving financial inclusion for women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises. And in closing, we cannot overemphasize the intersectionality of decent work, labor rights, gender equality, and women empowerment. Our commitment should be encompassing and multidimensional if we want sustainable and inclusive outcomes. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Cook Islands to take the floor.
Kia ora na tātou katotoa, Honourable Chair and esteemed delegates. If we want to empower women, we must start by supporting their children and their families. Many of you will understand a woman's work does not always start when she enters the workplace. It begins the moment she opens her eyes, where she is a chef, a teacher, a nurse. She is the CEO of her home before going to work. The Cook Islands Labour Force Survey reveals women are engaged in more unpaid work than men. As primary caregivers of children and elderly in the household and community, responsible for 75% of all domestic duties, this negatively impacts women's pursuit of a career or business. So if we want to change this story, we must reduce her burden of care. For the Cook Islands, it starts with our social protection system, which provides a $1,000 newborn allowance and a universal child benefit for all children to the age of 16. Our government are committed to extending paid maternity from 6 to 14 weeks and paid paternity leave from 2 days to 2 weeks to give support to the crucial first 100 days of life. It continues to our commitment to our universal pension for every Cook Islander over 60 years old, and our National Positive Aging Unit tasked with addressing the care gap for our elderly. Our NGO and CSO partners also play a vital role in the reduction of gender-based violence, the empowerment of women, and women in leadership. We have begun extensive work in the childcare space to ensure that women feel supported to return or remain in the workplace for a very small population like the Cook Islands, with only 15,000 people. This is important to us. And as a mother who feels safe and financially secure, will feel safe to bear children. I come from a small outer island called Atiu, with less than 500 people. We face unique challenges in the outer islands which hinders our economic activity. So to respond to this, our government implemented a freight subsidy to boost outer island economies. And for our women and girls with disability, our government prioritizes inclusive education and has worked to collaborate with disability NGOs like Creative Center to develop employment pathways to empower our persons with disability. Honourable Chair, before I end, I would like to wish us all and all our children a happy International Children's Day today. And today, my government will be launching our second Te Pito Manawa o Te Ano, our Cook Islands National Policy for Children 2025 to 2030, with a focus on early childhood development, childcare, and protection.
Please wrap
And
up.
we were all young boys and girls once. The future of our girls relies on us to remove the inequalities we have borne. Proverbs 31:26
Thank you,
says,
distinguished
thank
delegate.
you very much. You can read the verse. Me takira nui.
Are there any other government which wants to make a statement? Samoa? The distinguished delegate from Samoa? Be brief, please.
Thank you, Chair. Talo Palama and warm Pacific greetings. Samoa reaffirms its commitment to advancing gender equality and women's empowerment through transformative community-driven initiative. Our district development program is rooted in faith, family, and community and has achieved over 1,000 jobs created in rural areas, uplifting families. Agreements for 50% women's representation in district councils, ensuring inclusive governance. A historical 20% allocation of district budget, totaling 8.5 million tala across 51 districts, directly supporting gender-responsive initiative. This groundbreaking investment supports projects addressing systematic challenges and empowers women as agents of change in economic development, digital inclusion, and climate resilience. However, sustaining this initiative requires collective action and innovative partnership. Strategic priorities and call to action. First, ECD for resilient communities. Establish childcare centers and early learning hubs to reduce caregiving burdens and enable women to pursue education, work, and leadership. Second, women and climate resilience. Support women-led projects in sustainable agriculture and disaster preparedness, strengthening communities against climate impacts, and enhance access to climate resources and green livelihoods. Samoa calls for joint efforts and resourcing. To sustain and scale this initiative, Samoa urges joint efforts to resource a specialist prevention team. Over 5 years, this team will focus on capacity building, integrating programs, and ensuring long-term impact across our 51 districts. Samoa historical 8.5 million investment in women-led and gender-responsive initiative is transforming communities. We invite global partners, multilateral organizations, and stakeholders to join us in mobilizing resources and expertise to ensure our vision of inclusive, resilient, and equitable development becomes a lasting reality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegates. As I see no other requests from governments, I will now open the floor for the intervention of intergovernmental organizations and United Nations identities. There are 2 minutes being provided for this. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SARC. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of Ghulam Sarwar, Secretary General of SARC, I express my gratitude for the opportunity to represent the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation at this August conference. Women face disproportionate barriers, including lack of access to capital, digital tools, markets, and childcare, which limit their ability to pursue a livelihood. This is clubbed by lack of appropriate skills and societal norms that bar women's full participation in the economies. While women face many obstacles and challenges to actively participate in the economy on equal terms, significant progress has been made towards gender equality. As we explore ways to expand more opportunities for women, it is equally important to focus on building women's resilience. Investing in women contributes to families, communities, and economies, and it pays in terms of inclusive economic growth in future. When women start contributing economically, their children are more likely to attend school and are much healthier. The employment of women is not only a fundamental aspect of economic development, but also a crucial determinant of social progress and gender equality. Excellencies, SARC leaders have underscored the need to improve the social and economic status of women. The resolve of our leaders to empower women is manifested in SARC's social and economic agenda. Aimed at promoting their economic and financial independence, the SARC Social Charter contains goals and principles which provides an overarching framework for social protection. Sabah, the first pilot project funded by the SARC Development Fund, SDF, under its social window, was intended to empower women-based workers through economic self-sufficiency by harnessing their indigenous skills for producing market-oriented products. SDF's livelihood project aims to enhance small farmers in the SARC region through small-scale agribusiness, focusing on value chain development. Moreover, the SARC's dialogue on financing for social protection is a commitment to the principal goal of SARC in promoting the welfare of people of South Asia. Chair, we hope that this review will be fruitful in improving the livelihood of women and their economic empowerment through employment, decent work, social protection, and entrepreneurship. And states will dwell deeper in deciding key policies which will result in positive outcomes. I thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate, I now invite the distinguished delegate of the International Labour Organization. The floor is yours.
Distinguished Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Beijing+30 takes place in a time of transformation. We reinforce efforts to achieve the SDGs in 2030 whilst facing times of multiple and long-lasting crises and a general pushback on gender equality and the questioning of what we thought we acquired in women's rights. Today, decent work remains an unattained goal for women who are underrepresented in formal sectors and face lower pay, threats to their safety, and occupational segregation, not least in STEM sectors, which will only grow in demand with advances in technology and the challenge of mitigating and adapting to climate change. Women in unions are a critical part of reducing decent work deficits. Unions must be at the table as part of tripartite social dialogue and policy making and decisions about policy and investment that directly affect millions of workers. Women face multiple and intersecting barriers to decent work, including disability, age, motherhood, migrant status, indigeneity, and time poverty due to shouldering a disproportionate burden of care work. The world of work is one of the most powerful catalysts for women's empowerment and autonomy. Access to decent work not only provides women with financial independence, but strengthens their decision-making power in their personal and professional lives. One of the factors determining the ability of women to participate in the labor market remains the burden of caring responsibilities. This year's ILO Labor Conference adopted a historic resolution concerning decent work and the care economy. Its conclusions are abundantly clear. Care work, paid and unpaid, is essential to all other decent work. Labor in the care economy is not a commodity. A rights-based approach to care guided by international labor standards is essential. Care leave policies and quality, accessible services boost women's labor force participation, redistribute unpaid care work, support work-life balance, and enhance productivity.
Please round up.
Decent work for care workers contributes to quality care and support. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I will now open the floor for interventions from civil society representatives and other stakeholders. International Longevity Center, Singapore.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants, by 2050, 1 in 4 persons in the region will be 60 years and over. The majority will be women, especially among the oldest over 80 years old. While older women outnumber older men, they are more likely to be poorer and face economic insecurity. As a UN brief published in 2022 noted, old age poverty has a woman's face. Poverty or economic insecurity in old age does not just suddenly happen. It is the cumulative result of a lifetime of disadvantages faced by women. Women have lower levels of savings and pensions in old age, while often lacking social protection. Yet, older women remain largely invisible in global policy discourses. The needs of older women are, to quote the Global Gender Snapshot 2023, not fully articulated in the Sustainable Development Goals. A recent HelpAge analysis of donor funding finds that a mere 0.1% of total gender equality-focused funding includes older women. Data on older women is also often missing. If nothing changes, older women will still be left behind. We therefore call upon Asia-Pacific member states to, 1, incorporate a life course approach to aging, examining how policies affect the women in the entire lifespan. 2, mainstream gender and aging across all policies and programs and ensure that gender equality discussions explicitly include older women. And 3, improve data collection and reporting systems to cover older women. By adopting an inclusive, all ages approach, we can enable older women to contribute positively to their societies and significantly improve their lives. Thank you.
Corrections. I wish to invite the Mission for Migrant Workers to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the Asia-Pacific region. Today, I want to highlight the pressing economic justice issues faced by women in East Asia, particularly in the context of shrinking spaces for gender equality and rising military tensions. While East Asia countries promote women's empowerment through employment and entrepreneurship, significant challenges remain. Despite advancements in women's education and participation in the workforce, women predominantly shoulder care roles, often with limited autonomy and economic freedoms. With aging populations and impact brought by the pandemic, the burden is severer than ever. Migrant women often fill critical care roles in East Asia are suffering from the neoliberal policies and development strategies that reinforce migrations based on cheap labor over their rights and well-being. Labor export programs of specific countries are merely focused on commodifying cheap labor of women from the global south, while at the same time touting the programs as drivers of national development despite the overlapping dangers and risks they pose on marginalized communities. With aging populations and impact brought by the pandemic, the burden is existing. The risk of informal work among women was further marginalized women in the regions, as they frequently fall outside labor protections that ensures freedom of associations and collective bargaining. Existing business models and labor protection policies often failed to address gender and disability inclusions, leaving women in the regions, especially those engaged in care work, unpaid or unrecognized in workforce and economic statistics. Women from disadvantaged backgrounds, such as those with lowered economic status, disabilities, restricted with immigration status, who identifying as LGBTQI, face heightened risk and unemployment.
Delegate.
Thank you.
I now invite the distinguished delegate of Women and Media Collective to take the floor.
Dear Chair, I speak on behalf of 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the Asia-Pacific region. The current economic model, rooted in the financialized globalization, has resulted in the rise of authoritarianism, militarism, and conflict in the region. It has also unleashed a serious debt crisis with intolerable austerity measures, rising inequality, and increasing poverty, exacerbating the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and heightening the gender-based violence, including structural violence for women in all their diversities. To advance gender-affirmative economic justice, rights, decent work, and social protection, member states must enable economic justice and economies that work for people and the planet, with social protection flows in place towards dignified lives and decent wages for including women, ensure the public employment provides secure flow in terms of wages, working contracts, and labor protection that can serve as a benchmark for private sector employment, make public-private partnerships accountable to prevent corporate capture of essential public services, and increase public spending on health, education, social protection, and ensure a decent standard of living for women, including women in all their diversity, especially from marginalized communities. Ensure women have access to equitable work and employment opportunities which protect women's labor rights and eliminate conditions of precarious and exploitative forms of employment. Ratify and enforce ILO Convention C-190 on violence and harassment in the world of work. Report regularly on the measures taken to implement the convention and be accountable to prevent violence and harassment at work against the women and gender diverse people permitted and maintained through national and legal economic systems. Implement comprehensive policies for women's access to decent work, which should include strict provisions in livable wages
Please
and
round
working
up.
conditions enabled through inclusive and just labor laws.
Thank
It's
you.
time for us to act
Thank you,
boldly,
Delegate.
concretely for a transformative gender just future. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of the Southwest International to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellencies and honorable guests, it's a privilege to address you today. I represent Soroptimist International, a global network of dedicated women volunteers committed to empowering women and girls through impactful community projects across 118 countries. Since 1921, Soroptimist International has remained steadfast in its mission to empower girls through educational opportunities vital to enable them to pursue their ambitions, the first step towards women's liberation. Educating a girl brings lifelong benefits. In adulthood, she is more likely to become financially independent, raise healthier children, gain community respect, and seek help if in an abusive relationship. So we advocate for gender equality in schools to give girls an equal opportunity to succeed. While the world has made significant strides in bridging the gender gap in education, crucial work remains to be done, especially in advancing this goal across the global south. The high dropout rate among girls remains a critical issue, with many facing early marriage and increased risk of violence and abuse. In 2019, 1 in 5 women married before 18. Raising the legal marriage age and keeping girls in school longer are key to reducing child marriage, exploitation, and violence. A multifaceted approach is essential. Policies should support retention, allowing girls to repeat a grade if needed. Cultural perceptions of girls must shift, with governments playing a key role in challenging gender stereotypes through campaigns, media, and education. Building more schools in rural areas, ensuring such facilities as toilets, and employing more female teachers can make schools safer and more accessible for girls. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. As I see no more speakers, I would like to thank the moderator, panelists, and delegates for their active participation. The meeting is now concluded. Its deliberations under Agenda Item 3A, Advancing Women's Economic Empowerment through Employment, Decent Work, Social Protection, and Entrepreneurship. We will now take up Agenda 3B, Strengthening Women's Participation and Leadership in Asia and the Pacific. The second roundtable discussion will be moderated by Ms. Cindy Bishop, Regional United Nations Women Goodwill Ambassador for Asia and Pacific. May I please ask the moderator and the panelists of the second roundtable discussion to take their seats in the sofa chairs. Ms. Bishop, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, dear participants, I am pleased to welcome you all to this roundtable on strengthening women's participation and leadership in Asia and the Pacific. My name is Cindy Bishop. I am UN Women Goodwill Ambassador to Asia and the Pacific, as well as co-founder of Dragonfly 360, a regional platform that advocates for inclusive and conscious leadership in the region. And I am very honored to moderate this important discussion today. As we mark 30 years since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration, our conversation today couldn't be more timely. Progress has been made, but it is long overdue that we break down the barriers that are still holding women back. Today's discussion will highlight how we can harness global commitments to gender equality, sustainable development, and inclusive governance to drive women's participation and leadership forward. We are fortunate to have an outstanding panel of leaders and change makers here to guide us. Each bring a unique perspective on advancing women's leadership across our region. Joining me this morning are Her Excellency Architect Siti Rosa Marianti Dato Haji Abdul Rahman, Secretary General of ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly and champion of AIPA Plan of Action on Women's Political Participation. Her Excellency Ms. Elvina Sousa Carvalho, Secretary of State for Equality, Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. Ms. Ipul Pawasao, Senior Program Manager, Disability Inclusion, PNG Women-Led Program and Pacific Region Focal Person for the Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network, and Dr. Amina Sujimoto, CEO and founder of Fermata Incorporated. During our discussion, each panelist will have the opportunity to share their insights through 2 rounds of questions. A friendly reminder to our participants, you each have 3 minutes each for each question. Let us dive into these critical conversations. We'll start with you, Your Excellency Ibu Yanti. You are the current Secretary General of the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly and a former member of Brunei's Legislative Council. What do you see as the biggest barriers to women's political participation and leadership in the ASEAN region, and how might regional bodies like AIPA help address these challenges?
Thank you so much. My microphone, is it working? Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much. I've actually got the chance to actually listen to a lot of our members that basically share the challenges. We do actually have a lot of common ground in terms of the challenges that we face. Now, in ASEAN, we actually have, of course, our 10 members. AIPA means the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly. And if we actually look into the numbers of our member of parliaments, there's about 2,924 member of parliaments throughout the 10 member states. We've actually had a caucus, or what we can actually call women parliamentarians. And IPA existed for more than 47 years. But WIPA, which is on the women side, actually started about 26 years ago. Now, if we actually look at the data itself, there's about 76 resolutions under the women caucus, which was actually adopted every single GA. But that actually touched with regards to the challenges that we face on the women participation in politics. About 20 resolutions has been raised in the past 20 years. So what we basically did this year, especially starting from Indonesia, was to actually get adoption with regards to the women participation in politics. That was last year. This year, we've basically adopted our first implementation framework on the women participation in politics and leadership. And we did that within 1 year, and this was during the chairmanship of Lao PDR, who is very supportive of this initiative, and to be able to actually do this within their chairmanship in just a year. So what we basically hope for is to actually have the implementation staged this year. But if we actually look at, in terms of the percentage, numbers of women in ASEAN is only 21% of our women parliamentarians. The numbers increase, but it's really increased slowly. The highest among our member states is Vietnam, who actually reaches 30%, followed by Singapore and followed by Philippines. So we have a really good numbers in terms of that. And again, we see these kind of things in a way that we always share best practices, how other countries can actually do this. But with this implementation framework that we've just had it adopted, we work very closely with UN Women, and thank you so much for them, really support this initiative. And we actually have our action plan that's going to look into 2024 until 2030. We'll start off with Malaysia chairmanship for ASEAN, and implementation will actually start. So all those things that we actually discussed with regards to the challenges that we face will actually go through this action plan as well, because when we actually drafted it, we've actually bring in all our members in to really come up with this framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. That sounds very hopeful indeed. Your Excellency, Salsa Carveo, this year's National Review and Evaluation on the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action highlighted significant achievements in increased representation of women in political positions in Timor-Leste. Can you share some of the key milestones from this review and how they reflect Timor-Leste's progress towards gender equality in political leadership?
Thank you very much. Inspired by the perseverance, courage, and the participation of women in the resistance or in the fighting for independence, the government and the government is really put the women's participation at the heart of every policies, and I think it is a great honor for me to participate here to share the Timor-Leste's achievements and milestones. I can say now Timor-Leste, when we look at the representation in the national parliament, Timor-Leste reached 37%, which makes Timor-Leste the highest in the Asia-Pacific region since 2012. And in the government, in the 9th constitutional government, we have 15% women in the cabinet. And while women's representation in the local level as Suku Chief decreased slightly from 5% to 4%, but we remain committed to increase the participation of women in the political representation. Women presentation at the municipal level is still good because for the last 5 years we have 3 women served as the president of the municipal government. And furthermore, women constitute 20% in the comparison to men, 77% in decision-making positions in the civil service. In addition, Timor-Leste had 10 ambassadors and 7 councillors, and demonstrating great strides in promoting women's leadership in the fields of diplomacy and international affairs for the last 5 years. The number of women in decision-making in civil service sector and the local governments are much lower than men, but the government continues to strive to increase the number of women occupying in the managerial position and in the civil service and the local government. I can say that in accordance or in compliance to the international commitments, and we are fully committed to increase the number of participation of women in politics, and we are committed to increase the number of participation in the all level, including in the civil servant, in the public offices, and also in the local level. Currently, I can say we are in the right path. We comply to the international agenda, but we also, as I mentioned earlier, that inspired by the perseverance and the courage and the courage that women have, and work alongside with the men, the warriors, and the veterans to participate in the struggle for independence. This is one of the reasons that push us, the government, to put the women at the center of every policies and prioritizing women in every policies.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Over to you, Ms. Poasao. You are a disability rights advocate whose work was awarded with an OBE for the Queen's Honors List. Can you tell us a little bit more about the unique barriers that women with disabilities face in leadership, and how can we break down these barriers?
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. I'd like to start by telling a story. I was an agricultural scientist working in a research institute, coffee research institute. I had polio when I was a little girl, a toddler. And I had never wanted to be associated with people with disabilities because of the stigma and discrimination that I faced when I was growing up. My parents didn't want me to go to school, but I had to cry my way to go to school. So when I graduated from the university, eventually my parents had to let me go because I had to force them to let me go. When I graduated from the university, I went to work at the Coffee Research Institute in Papua New Guinea. And in 2006, I was asked to attend a gathering of women with disability leaders in one of our cities. And it was there that I heard the cries of 3 women that actually made me realize my privilege, but also my identity. One actually said that when she goes to the clinic to seek for healthcare services, she is asked to take a back seat and let the good people be treated first. The other one also told the story about how when she arrives at the city market, she doesn't have a place to put her wares. Now, these 2 women sit in wheelchairs. And the third one told the story of her wanting to go into town, but she couldn't be able to get onto the public motor transport, or even the buses that run the highway because she is in a wheelchair. And that was that moment when I realized that I am one of them. And they were wanting a voice to advocate for their issues. And you see, what this shows us is that there are a lot of women with disabilities from diverse identities, women, indigenous women with disabilities, young girls with disabilities, women with disabilities who are of diverse identities. I realized that they needed that voice. And so I decided that I will take up their voice. But it requires that I had to leave my job. I had 3 children who were at the universities, and I had to discuss with them as to the issues that were posed in front of me. They needed a voice. And even though we have women's organizations in the country, we have CSOs organizations in the country, voices of women and girls with disabilities continue to be marginalized because of the various barriers that we face. Stigma and discrimination, as I told you, is deeply ingrained, and this actually marginalized voices of women with disabilities and girls with disabilities in the communities and institutional settings. The lack of accessibility, as I pointed out, even limits their ability to engage fully. The underrepresentation of women with disabilities are significantly underrepresented in policy bodies, perpetuating our exclusion. Many of the data that we collect fail to disaggregate information by disability and gender. This oversight obscures the specific needs and experiences of women and girls with disabilities, resulting in policies that are neither inclusive nor responsive to their needs. The intersectional inequalities also further marginalize
May
our
I ask you
voices.
to wrap up, please? Thank you.
So I guess what we really need to do now is to recognize that these are the barriers that we face, and we need to do something about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us some insight into the barriers that women still face and what we can do. Dr. Sujimoto, you were born in Asia, raised in Africa, and educated in Europe. You come from a diverse and multicultural background, and in 2019, you launched Fermata, which has become a leading femtech ecosystem in Asia. How can we ensure that women in all their diversity are included in decision-making processes at all levels and recognized as leaders?
Well, thank you for the opportunity for me to speak today. As being introduced, my name is Dr. Mina Sugimoto, and I'm specializing in global public health, but I also founded a company called Fermata in 2019, which is a private company dedicated to advancing women's health through technology, femtech, which now has become one of the largest femtech ecosystems in Japan and also in Asia. So our question today asks, how can we ensure young women in all their diversity are included in decision-making process at all levels and recognized as leaders? And for me, from someone who comes from the private sector, the path forward is quite clear, or very clear. We need more investments into industries and researches that address women's health. Often those health needs are overlooked. And one such industry is femtech. And for those who are not familiar with what femtech is, femtech leverages technologies to improve women's health, tackling issues from menstruation to reproductive health, to menopause, and also conditions such as endometriosis, dementia, and cancers. The global market is projected to reach $1 trillion USD by 2032, and it's a huge number. And this highlights how the tremendous potential impact that this new industry could put. Now, through my work at Fermata, I work with a lot of femtech companies abroad and also in Japan, mostly our startups. I've learned that true equality can only be achieved when we embrace our biological and sexual diversity. Conversation around workplace equality or equity often overlook physical and mental or emotional burdens that women carry, such as due to menstruation or menopause. These realities significantly impact performance and well-being at work and also at home, yet these conversations still remain a taboo in most of the countries. We must change this narrative and make this topic as a center of our discussion today. Now, you might wonder why femtech? Because technology can unlock insights and solutions once thought unimaginable. From analyzing saliva to menstrual blood to vaginal health, femtech is revolutionizing our understanding of female body. By providing women with tools to understand and manage their health, we empower them to make informed choices. And moreover, incorporating women's health data into AI system can address gender imbalance that we currently face in an artificial intelligence world. And this paves the way for more inclusive technological advancements for future generations. So we must recognize that the world today is very vastly different from 30 years ago when the Beijing Declaration was adopted. Technology advances rapidly, and our strategies for addressing gender equality should also evolve at the same time. Femtech is more than just health technology. It is a tool for breaking barriers and dismantling the glass ceiling that has restricted women leadership opportunity for way too long. Yeah, so that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sujimoto, for your impactful and insightful remarks and enlightening us as well how femtech can help to elevate women's decision-making process. I want to turn back to you, Your Excellency, Sausa Cabello. With the adoption of the Strategic Framework for Women in Politics, Timor-Leste has engaged line ministries, national parliaments, civil society, political parties, and development partners to promote women's leadership. Could you elaborate on how this collaborative approach is driving tangible changes for women in politics and what you envision as the next steps for sustained progress?
Thank you very much. First of all, I forgot to mention that for the first ever, Timor-Leste have the first female House Speaker elected, and it is, I consider, one of the milestones that we have. And but as I mentioned, all the successes we have for the representation, the number or the representation of women is high. We still have, in the local level, we still have some gaps. That's why, to address these gaps, we have some strategies that I would love to share here. That is, we engage with civil society, national civil society. We engage with UN Women and also other CSO to address that gaps. That includes some 8 key areas that are very important. One is capacity building and training, recognizes the limited access to the political and diplomatic network, and inadequate support on skill training and capacity building. This remains one of the challenges, so we address that, we prioritized in capacity building and training, and also strengthening the implementation of gender equality within political parties. We provide gender equality training to political party leaders. We advocate with the party leaders to give opportunity and also to empower their member in the political party, within the political party, such as the political party women's wing organization. Then we have gender responsive budgeting for women in politics, which ensures the allocation of budget to the political parties and relevant institutions to implement commitment on gender equality and empowerment of women's political participation, and strengthening and increase women's leadership in decentralization and local power. We secured 30% of women's participation in local parliament, which is going to be implemented in the next 1 or 2 years. But we secure 30% of representation by introducing quota. So the quota is very important. One of the key I can say one of the key assets, and also it's if the party don't comply, and then it will the list will be rejected. So it's I can say one of the most important asset, and also one of the important tool to increase the number of to increase and secure women's participation. And also we have inclusive security for women candidates and voters, which guarantees the provision of security and develop gender-sensitive security plans to ensure security for women candidates and voters. Because we are from a very strong patriarchal society, and I can say women have to have the courage to be able to candidate themselves, to step forward, to say they are ready to be the leader, but they have to meet some of the challenges, because the strong patriarchal society is very challenging for women. But I can say that the Timor-Leste, anywhere, everywhere, when you said about a strong democracy, strong democracy requires all participation of all women, men, people with disabilities, LGBTQI communities, and also vulnerable groups.
Everyone in society,
I think
agree.
The society, so this strong democracy needs that, and Timor-Leste realized that it is very, very important to have women and other vulnerable groups and everybody to be included in the decision-making process.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
It's very, very true. Your Excellency Ibu Yanti, Given your extensive experience in both the public and private sectors, including as a founding member of the ASEAN Future Workforce Council and director and principal architect of Eco Bumi Architect, how can we leverage partnerships between government and industry to support and inspire the next generation of women leaders, particularly in fields traditionally dominated by men?
Thank you so much. Now, throughout my journey of my career, I basically wear a few hats. I started when I graduated from university working with the government for 15 years before I embarked to being a professional architect. Then I was basically appointed when I was being in the private sector. I was appointed as a member of parliament for 5 years. Now, during that particular time, I also represent Brunei as the chair for the ASEAN Business Advisory Council in 2021. I also chair for the Women and also Economic under the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly when Brunei basically chair. So it is a cross-cutting, but it is also important to really understand that government, industry, and also academia really need to actually work hand in hand as a tripartite. Now, I basically I used to be, and still is, in the construction industry. As you all know, construction industry is a very male-dominant industry. So I was the first president in the industry, in the professional side, after 37 years that break the ceiling to become the first female president to really look into this particular area. We do understand that it is not an easy ride. As all you know, I am not young. I am a mother of 5. I am also a grandmother of 2 beautiful grandchildren. But it doesn't stop us as women to actually say, that's it, because this is really the beginning of our journey to really push a lot of things that we need to actually do. And I believe in mentoring. I really, really believe in mentoring. When I was basically with my company, I mentored more than 200 students for the past 14 years. And about 30% of these students that I mentor become an architect. So you can actually see the path that those that you actually mentor and giving the network the skills that they basically need. It's the same thing as really empowering women, whether it's in the political or in leadership. So all these are basically needed, and we all need the support from all of those. Now, what I actually wanted to maybe just to touch base is, because I am representing ASEAN in this political arena of ASEAN, I just like to actually emphasize this. Women political participation in ASEAN is not just about the representation. It is about overcoming the deep-rooted barriers that we foresee and ensuring women's leadership is seen as essential, not as optional. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Over to you now again, Ms. Pawasao. You have championed the rights of women with disabilities, opening spaces for them to participate fully, equally, and meaningfully. How can we all promote inclusive leadership models that integrate both gender and disability perspectives across the Asia-Pacific region?
Thank you. Building capacities of young girls and women with disabilities, establishing networks, and within this you can be able to provide mentorship between gender and women with disabilities, or the women's space, mainstream space, and women with disabilities. Also, in terms of policy engagement, having the voices of young girls and women with disabilities also on the table, sitting at the table, having their voices heard. Resource mobilization, it is important that a lot of our networks of women with disabilities are done voluntarily, and we need to mobilize resources to help them to establish their organization so that they can have their voices and agency to speak on their behalf. I think one of the areas that we can look at in terms of Beijing+ progress or plan of action, monitoring progress by setting measurable goals and track progress towards gender disability equity in leadership by 2030, and investing in future leaders to establish sustainable funding mechanisms to support initiatives aimed at empowering women and girls with disabilities and diverse feminist groups. I think those are some of the strategies that we can look at if we want to improve inclusive leadership in Asia Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Poasau. And lastly, to you, Dr. Sujimoto, you charted new territory to create a game changer. In your view, what powerful new narratives are needed to drive both inclusive and transformational leadership in the region?
Well, thank you. Well, this was a very difficult question, Sansa. But before I dive into my response, I would like to acknowledge that unfortunately, the world we live in is still shaped by traditional narratives around leadership that are largely driven by male experiences and priorities. So I come from Japan, and this reality is sadly deeply familiar. Despite global pressure and increasing awareness of the importance of women's empowerment, Japan remains alarmingly low in the global gender equality index, with women holding less than 10% of pole position in the private sector, which I believe the global average is about 25%. And politically, the situation is equally troubling. With the recent election, only a very few women were elected in the recent election. So I believe everyone in this room knows the sense of frustration and hopelessness when our voices, or when we continue to hit the glass ceiling, when our words and voices aren't heard. And this might paint a grim future in the case of Japan as well, but my experience over the 5 years in Japan advocating for women's health and technology show me that this could potentially be a huge opportunity if and only if we can craft strategic and tailored narrative for those in position of influence, mostly men. To engage others in narratives, to engage others in our narratives, we must learn to speak their language of those we aim to reach, even if they don't yet share our vision or values. We need to invite them to see women's health not just a women's issue, but as a fundamental component of societal advancement. For instance, in Japan, in the private sector, we try to align our message with global trends like ESGs and SDGs so that the companies can make their stakeholder happy. Now, for the public sector, we support them to reframe femtech as a strategic solution to critical issues like population decline and workforce shortages. By linking women's health to economic resilience and national stability, we can make it easier for leaders to participate. We must assist them to position women's health and well-being as a strategic investment in economic and social stability and not simply as a matter of women's rights. Speaking their language is not a compromise. It is a deliberate choice and a strategic approach to advancing meaningful change. It's about creating narrative that provide tangible incentive for each stakeholder so that they can participate. This requires reframing our conversations to highlight their belief and gradually shifting their perspective. And this approach may take long-term strategic thinking, design thinking, and as well as strong resilience. I think by doing so, we can bring more voices in the leadership table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sujimoto. And thank you to all of our panelists for your thoughtful and engaging contributions. Excellencies, distinguished participants, this concludes our roundtable. I hope you found today's discussion as educational and inspiring as I did. Let's all take these ideas further to foster greater leadership opportunities for women across our region. I now return the floor to the chair. Thank you.
Excellencies, thank you, Ms. Bishop and panelists, for this engaging and enlightening discussion. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I will now open the floor for country statements. I would like to urge all speakers to adhere to the time limit of 3 minutes to ensure we can hear from all those participating. The Secretariat has received speaking requests, and we also call on governments in the room who raise their flag. I will first open the floor to statements from members, associate members, and permanent observers. I will then invite statements from intergovernmental organizations, United Nations entities, and civil society representatives, and other stakeholders. I open the floor for statements. I now invite the distinguished guest delegate of Nauru, followed by Lao People's Democratic Republic. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, Moyoran. Nauru firmly believes that advancing gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but also key to sustainable development and resilience in Asia Pacific. Strengthening women's leadership and participation in decision-making is at the heart of our efforts to build a more inclusive, prosperous, and resilient society. Women in Nauru actively participate in local governance, with female leaders engaged in community decision-making and resource management. However, we acknowledge that while progress has been made, challenges remain, and women continue to face barriers to full participation in political leadership. In the 2022 elections, Nauru had the highest number of female candidates in the history of the electoral system. However, when measured against men candidates, a clear barrier of underrepresentation of women in the national parliament still exists. We are committed to creating more inclusive political processes and empowering women through mentorship programs, leadership training, and electoral reforms. We are working to raise awareness about the importance of women in leadership roles, particularly in shaping policies that directly impact our communities. Regionally, Nauru is aligned with and strongly support initiatives that promote gender equality in leadership, such as the Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration, which underscores the importance of women in decision-making at all levels. Nauru has committed to creating pathways for women to enter political, economic, and community leadership roles, and is collaborating with the Pacific Islands Forums to ensure women have access to leadership development programs, such as the Pacific Women Shaping Pacific Development Initiative. These programs focus on building the skills and networks women need to assume leadership roles in their countries. Empowering women is essential for creating a strong and sustainable future in the Pacific. To achieve this, we must address the systemic barriers that limit women's leadership opportunities. Nauru remains committed to ensuring that women's voices are heard, their leadership supported, their rights fully recognized, and we call on all nations in the region to continue working together to remove barriers, enhance opportunities, and build a more inclusive and equitable future for all. Matubakar, thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Laos People's Democratic Republic, followed by India.
Excellency, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Lao government, I am honored to participate in this roundtable meeting to share lessons and good practice on strengthening women participation and leadership in the Asia-Pacific. The Lao PDA is fully committed to the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action to promote gender equalities and empowerment of women and girls. The government has paid attention to the promotion of women participation in decision-making at all levels and in all aspects of political, economic, social, cultural, and family rights. Lao government pursued the policy to focus efforts on preventing and resolving a few social problems, including gender inequality, gender-based violence, human trafficking, and other issues. The government paid attention to the comprehensive development of young officials, female officials, and the officials with disability and officials from ethnic groups. Government has set indicators of the 9 National Socio-Economic Development Plan and the 4 National Plan of Action on Gender Equality for the period to 2021 to 2025 to include at least 20% of key government officials should be women. 15% of management positions in the state and the mass organization should be reserved for women. And female members of the National Assembly should exceed 30%. The Lao government has a clear policy in advancing women participation and contribution in the national socio-economic development and in public and social life. To this end, the government is fostering supportive conditions and equal opportunity for women across sectors to grow and thrive. The special focus is placed on supporting women in upgrading their need skill in politics and administration, technical expertise, foreign language skill, and other competency necessary to qualify for leadership positions at all levels of central government and local administration. To affirmatively promoting gender equality and empowering of women, especially through strengthening women participation and leadership, Lao PDI actively maintains three national mechanisms. Firstly, the government represented by the National Commission for the Advancement of Women and Mother and Children. Secondly, the mass organization represented by the Lao Women's Union. And thirdly, the legislature represented by the National Assembly Women Caucus. The most outstanding of strengthening women participation in leadership is that Lao PDI has a female vice president of the country. In the legislative body, there is a woman who is the vice president of the National Assembly. In the judiciary, there are women who is president of the Supreme People Court and vice president of the Supreme People Prosecutor Office. And most recently, in the Lao People Army, there are 3 women who have been promoted to the rank of the Brigadier General. This distinguished delegate, because of the time, so the Lao government reaffirmed further strengthen our collaboration partnership with all stakeholders in the Asia-Pacific region and the international community on this matter. I would like to reiterate the government commitment to implement the Beijing platform for action to achieve gender equality and women empowerment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of India, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. Guided by the vision of women-led development, increasing women's labor force participation and leadership is a priority for India and is instrumental to the vision of becoming a developed economy. To bolster this, India is fostering women's entrepreneurship by ensuring collateral-free loans at a scale, market linkages, networking support, gender-responsive public procurement policies, and also expanding social protection for women through saturation of essential services for the poor and marginalized, such as affordable housing, incentivizing women's property ownership, and universal health coverage. In India today, we have significant presence of women across political spectrum. The highest public office in India is today held by a woman. That is not very common across the globe. We are not content with our current achievements and are taking all steps to increase women's political presence. Last year, the Indian Parliament passed the Nari Shakti Bandhan Adhiniyam, reserving 1/3 seats in the House of People in the National Parliament and in all federal state legislative assemblies for women, marking a historic milestone in our journey. This is built on the foundation of constitutional reservation of 33% of seats for women in the rural and urban local governments. Today I am proud to say that over 1.45 million or 46% of the total elected representatives in the local governments are women, thus making India the country with the largest absolute number of elected women in grassroots politics globally. Our journey so far has been encouraging and a learning experience, although much remains to be done going forward. India extends full support to ESCAP and the UN Women in identifying solutions that address regional challenges. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Japan, followed by Vanuatu. The floor is yours.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment. Japan is actively promoting the Women, Peace and Security agenda as one of its priority policies, and is working to strengthen the participation and leadership of women in Japan and abroad. Japan is committed to leading efforts to promote international discussions on WPS. In 2025, which marks the 25th anniversary of the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, we will co-chair the WPS Focal Points Network with Norway. The capital-level meeting will be held in Tokyo from 4 to 6 February next year, and we will focus on the themes of further development of WPS action plans and integration of knowledge and perspectives on disaster risk reduction and disaster response into the WPS agenda. Last year, Japan adopted its third WPS National Action Plan for the period 2023 to 2028. Japan's plan takes a unique approach by applying the WPS framework in responding to natural disasters and climate change, and it promotes greater participation of women in disaster risk reduction. This is because Japan, like many countries in Asia and the Pacific, is prone to natural disasters, necessitating urgent and robust response. On New Year's Day this year, the north caused more than 400 deaths and damaged about 137,000 housing units. In order to ensure that women's perspectives and needs were reflected in the establishment and operation of evacuation centers, officials from the Gender Equality Bureau of the Cabinet Office visited and requested the local task force, which was set up at the Ishikawa Prefectural Office, to take measures according to the guidelines for disaster prevention and reconstruction from the perspective of gender equality. In addition, Japan has made efforts to promote women's participation in decision-making processes in disaster risk reduction and in disaster-hit areas. Measures include compiling and disseminating good practices to increase the proportion of women on local disaster risk reduction councils, as well as know-how and case studies to encourage the development and active role of local women leaders in disaster risk reduction. However, women's participation in local communities and politics in normal times is essential to implement these activities, and we will continue to address this challenge. Japan will continue to strengthen its efforts to promote and implement WPS both domestically and internationally, drawing on Japan's experience with natural disasters. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Vanuatu to take the floor.
Chairman and distinguished heads of delegation and the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference here today, and CSO partners and representatives of the UN agencies. Vanuatu reaffirms its commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which was launched in 1995 during the Fourth Global Conference on Women, recognizing significant strides in enhancing women's leadership and political representation in both Asia and the Pacific. Over the past years, Vanuatu has celebrated key milestones, including the historic election of the first female member of parliament in 14 years, marking a total of only 6 female members of parliament in the country's 44 years of independence. Additionally, at local government level, Vanuatu has implemented special measures, the electoral process, which has achieved unprecedented gender balance, in electing its first female candidate with a disability. Vanuatu is also one of very few Pacific countries implementing special temporary measures for women's political representation at the local government level. These measures have yielded promising results, and including the election of the youngest female councillor and a lady mayor for the capital city of Port Vila. Most recently, these successes reflect the country's determination to address systemic barriers and foster an inclusive political environment. Beyond political representation, Vanuatu has prioritized building women's leadership capacity in public service, private sector companies, health, education, and community development. It has also invested in leadership pathway programs for the public service, especially in the health sector, as a means to investing in a pipeline of female leaders in critical sectors. Community disaster and climate change committees, which is an integral part of decentralization, saving and loans association and market vendor networks, have created opportunities for women to lead and thrive. Women in Tok together with over 9,000 members, including 746 women with disabilities, has shown the growing strength of women's networks in driving transformative change. As Vanuatu tests a democracy that has only seen 43 years, it's redefining its political future by creating space for women to lead. With a positive trajectory, Vanuatu is hoping to build a more inclusive and resilient society with the phrase that when women lead, everyone benefits. Thank you, Chairman and distinguished delegates, for your indulgence.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. Are there any other governments which wants to make a statement? I now invite the distinguished delegate of Russia, followed by the United States of America, followed by Pakistan. Thank you.
Спасибо, господин председатель. В Российской Федерации важным элементом обеспечения равных прав и возможностей для мужчин и женщин являлась национальная стратегия действий в интересах женщин на 2017-2022 годы. Реализация положений стратегии осуществлялась в таких сферах, как экономика, образование, занятость, здравоохранение, социальная поддержка граждан. В связи с завершением стратегии в 2022 году была утверждена новая национальная стратегия действий в интересах женщин на 2023-2030 годы. Стратегия до 2030 года направлена на консолидацию усилий федеральных органов государственной власти всех уровней, а также институтов гражданского общества по обеспечению равных прав и свобод женщин наравне с мужчинами. Новая стратегия основывается на том, что права женщин являются неотъемлемой частью общих прав человека. Создание условий для полного и равноправного участия женщин во всех сферах жизни, повышение экономической независимости, политической активности, возможностей самореализации женщин является приоритетным направлением государственной политики Российской Федерации. Важнейшим элементом стратегии является развитие программ женского лидерства и предпринимательства, укрепление позиций женщин в общественно-политической жизни страны и создание условий для развития их гражданской активности. В России женщины активно участвуют в общественно-политической жизни, государственном управлении и местном самоуправлении. Женщины занимают руководящие посты в правительстве, Совете Федерации, Государственной Думе, руководят различными федеральными службами и агентствами. Женщина является председателем Центрального банка, уполномоченным по правам человека и уполномоченной по правам ребенка. За 6 лет доля женщин-депутатов Государственной Думы увеличилась на 3,4% и составила 17%. Доля женщин-сенаторов Совета Федерации увеличилась на 3,3% и составила 19,8%. За последние 6 лет также увеличилось число женщин, занимающих должности в органах судебной власти и прокуратуры, и составило 81,1%. Хотела бы отметить, что под эгидой Совета Федерации и Федерального собрания Российской Федерации на регулярной основе с 2015 года проводится Евразийский женский форум, который является крупнейшей международной площадкой для обсуждения роли женщин в современном обществе. В сентябре текущего года форум прошел в России уже в 4-й раз. В нем приняли участие более 2000 человек из более чем 100 стран. Совет Евразийского женского форума реализует образовательную программу «Женщина-лидер», направленную на развитие лидерских качеств у женщин и формирование сообщества успешных женщин. Кроме того, в рамках прошедшего в сентябре форума прошла встреча министров по делам женщин стран БРИКС на тему «Женщины, управление и лидерство». В завершении хочу сказать, что каждая страна региона АТР интегрирует механизмы обеспечения равенства мужчин и женщин. Уверена, что наша встреча подчеркнула важность международного сотрудничества в решении гендерных вызовов. Спасибо.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of the United States of America, followed by Pakistan and Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Chair. Research has proven that increasing the number of women in decision-making roles can enhance the public's view of a government's legitimacy of a government and correlates with an improved ability to more effectively manage conflict. To ensure women can meaningfully participate in local decision-making spaces around conflict mitigation and prevention, the United States supports strengthening the leadership of local women across Asia and the Pacific. For example, in Papua New Guinea, the United States works to amplify and sustain the leadership of women, including young women and other historically marginalized groups, in preventing, resolving, and recovering from conflict, violent extremism, and gender-based violence. In 1997, the United States, through the U.S. Agency for International Development, became one of the first bilateral development agencies in the world to adopt a policy on disability to guide the agency's efforts towards disability inclusion. More recently, in 2024, USAID launched Nothing Without Us, USAID's disability policy, which responds to stakeholders' feedback, updates promising practices, places the agency's work within the current global context, and situates the United States and USAID to fulfill its long-standing commitment to non-discrimination and inclusion of persons with disability in society on an equitable basis with others. The United States remains committed to increasing women's participation and leadership here in the Asia-Pacific region and globally. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. And I invite the distinguished delegate of Pakistan, followed by Uzbekistan. The floor is yours.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates and participants, thank you. Pakistan's agenda for the next 5 years, we focus on the legislative and the policy reforms, including the establishment of a national policy on ending violence against women, enactment of the ICT domestic violence law, and expanding the job quota reserved for women across the public and the private sectors. We are strengthening the digital access and enhancing economic opportunities for women and ensuring effective monitoring of gender-responsive budgeting to sustain these initiatives. However, as we convene to address these shared challenges, Pakistan urges greater regional cooperation to support women's resilience to climate change and digital inclusion. Together, let us work to build an Asia-Pacific region where every woman and girl can thrive with dignity, safety, and equal opportunity. By enhancing regional partnerships, we can forge pathways that empower women to address the challenges of climate change, economic disparities, and digital transformation. Pakistan remains committed to upholding international obligations of gender equality and protecting vulnerable groups, acknowledging the journey towards securing fundamental rights as ongoing. Pakistan values global collaboration, particularly with the Beijing Platform for Action, UN Women, civil society, and other UN bodies. Nation celebrates progress in empowering women while recognizing the true gender equality is yet to be achieved. Reaffirming its dedication to the Beijing Platform, Pakistan pledges to continue building a future where all women and girls can fulfill their potential. And lastly, we need to break the traditional barriers imposed due to the patriarchal extremism and chalk out global statements for allowing them to fulfill them. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Uzbekistan to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 5 years, Uzbekistan has made significant progress in ensuring gender equality and women's rights. Uzbekistan has identified the following factors as a key to developing gender-inclusive electoral process. First, moving to a mixed electoral system that allows political parties to nominate women for winnable position on party list. Enshrining in law a 40% quota for women on party lists. Introducing elements of ZIP system which requires at least 2 women in every 5 candidates on the electoral list. launching a broad campaign to involve women in electoral process and developing their political skills. These measures has increased women political representation in Uzbek parliament to 38%. Recently, a woman has been re-elected as a new chairperson of upper house of Uzbek parliament. To increase of women representation in the executive branch of government, Uzbekistan has introduced a completely new quota system, stipulating that in government agencies appointed at least one woman as a deputy head. As a result, the proportion of women in leadership positions in government bodies has reached 35%. To promote women at the level of decision-making, Uzbekistan is training a new generation of women ready to leadership roles in politics and public administration. Uzbekistan has identified as an important area of its work ensuring women access to higher education, raising public awareness of the importance of women's role in country development and implementing a policy of zero tolerance to sexual harassment. Uzbekistan is firmly committed to continue its path towards gender equality, creating conditions in which women's voices will be heard at all levels of decision-making. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I will now open the floor for the interventions in intercontinental government organizations, United Nations identities, and civil society. The time limit is 2 minutes to cover all requests. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of the UNDP. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, women representation in national parliaments and local government positions remain well below global average in both Asia and the Pacific. Across public administrations, women occupy just 31% of top leadership positions. Within fragile and conflict-affected countries, women make up only 23% of public administrators, inhibiting resilience and weakening recovery. In judiciaries across Asia and the Pacific, women make up a minority of judges, especially at the senior levels. UNDP's 2023 Social Norms Index report, covering 85% of the global population, shows that 9 out of 10 men and women hold fundamental biases against women. These biases hold across regions, income, level of development, and cultures, necessitating global efforts to unlock the potential of women's leadership in delivering sustainable development. UNDP's gender equality strategy helps center women's voices, promote participation and leadership in delivering of the SDGs and CEDAW and meeting ambitions of the Beijing Declaration. Specifically, UNDP's Gender Equality Seal certification for public institution strengthens government gender inclusive practices and women's leadership, supporting countries to meet global equality standards. UNDP also works to strengthen networking of women judges in ASEAN and supports the development of tools and resources to advance gender equality in justice systems. This includes launching an initiative on strengthening women's leadership in the judiciary, including to address issues of discrimination, harassment, and violence facing women in decision-making roles. In addition, UNDP's Women Mediators platform empowers women in community peacebuilding, effectively establishing women's political engagement. And UNDP and UN Women are now launching a She Leads Climate Resilience initiative to put women leaders in politics and business at the center of green recovery from multidimensional crisis by fostering economic independence, building collaborative capacity, and working with men. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, followed by Palau Resource Institute and Center for Inclusive Policy. The floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, on behalf of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC, and our 38 member societies across Asia Pacific, it is a privilege to reaffirm our commitment to gender equality and empowerment of women in the region. Despite advancements, women and girls continue to be disproportionately affected by crisis. They face persistent barriers that limit opportunities, heighten vulnerabilities, and restrict access to life-saving services, including early warning systems. As auxiliaries to their governments, Red Cross and Red Crescent societies empower 20 million volunteers, more than half of them women and youth, who work at the grassroots level to foster inclusion, resilience, and decision-making to access essential services, especially in disaster response and recovery. Effective humanitarian response requires inclusivity, with women's perspectives and women's expertise embedded into decision-making. In 2021, the IFRC launched the Women as Humanitarian Leaders initiative to address the barriers women face in reaching leadership positions. At our regional conference last year, national society leaders renewed their commitment to achieving gender parity in leadership by 2027. Overall, advocacy for women leadership in humanitarian action must continue, and we call on governments to prioritize community-based solutions and ensure the meaningful inclusion of women in disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Finally, may I warmly invite you to join the side event on advancing women's humanitarian leadership, which will take place tomorrow at 1 p.m. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite Palau Resource Institute and Centre for Inclusive Policy. Two speakers there, and you have 4 minutes. The floor is yours.
Excellencies, disability is a human experience. It is not a checkbox or homogeneous experience. It is a reality that intersects our life from cradle to grave. It is time the world embraced this. As defined by the CRPD, disability includes long-term impairments that in interaction with various barriers hinder full and effective participation in society and an equal basis with others. Beyond physical, many live with invisible disabilities, psychosocial, intellectual, neurodivergent conditions, deafblindness, disabilities linked to aging, hidden yet profoundly shaping their lives. Now look around this room today. Do you see our diversity? Are we sitting here as peers, as leaders? We remain critically underrepresented. For us, these barriers are compounded by systemic inequalities. With limited access to education, healthcare, employment, and justice, diminishes our quality of life. It strips us of our autonomy, with heightened risk of gender-based violence, poverty, or exclusion from policy making. Our lived realities are often ignored. Indigenous and caste marginalized women with disabilities face compounded discrimination to the intersection of their identities. Leadership and decision-making must be inclusive. It must include those of us with disabilities. These opportunities remain inaccessible. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration called for transformational leadership rooted in diversity and inclusivity. Are we there yet? Reforms for inclusion often fail due to missing preconditions, universal accessibility, and reasonable accommodations. These are not optional. They are foundational to building inclusive systems.
Accessibility is about building connections to enable us to oppose ableism and centering on our self-autonomy and determination. It must be a human-centered approach. We are not just a DEI indicator. Beyond the physical, accessibility must include digital and informational access. In the age of global connections, we need nuanced and inclusive approaches more than ever. We want supported decision-making, and we need alternative communication models to be recognized. Without accessibility, the path to leadership is denied for all of us. With global eyes on the care economy, it highlights these critical gaps. Principles of self-determination and autonomy, as outlined in the CRPD, are not fully realized. This mismatch perpetuates fractured systems that fail to uphold our agency. To be represented at all levels, state action is needed to establish quotas or mandates for disability inclusion. Invest in our leadership training, aligning domestic frameworks with the Beijing Platform for Action and CRPD. Global frameworks like the SDGs, Jakarta Declaration, and ASEAN Enabling Master Plan all build upon human rights treaties, mainstream them. Prioritize indigenous women with disabilities as outlined in the CRPD Articles 6 and 21. Collaboration across sectors is essential to amplify our voices. Narratives on women's leaderships must be reshaped. We can create a future where we are not just in this room as participants, but are instrumental in shaping it together with you. We are leaders, visionaries, and the agents of change you need for an inclusive future. The time is now to resist exclusion, reclaim our spaces, and transform systems. We are reclaiming nothing about us without us.
Thank you, distinguished delegates. I now invite the distinguished delegates of Forum for Dignity Initiatives, Pakistan and Girls, the World. You have 3 minutes. There are 2 speakers. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Uzma Yaqoob, and I'm joined by Akriti Tyagi. We speak on behalf of 300 organizations from CSO Forum in Asia and the Pacific region, where more than 300 diverse feminist and women rights organizations gathered for our political unity and solidarity to advance the Beijing commitments. The Beijing Platform for Action calls for states to advance women's equal access to and participation in decision-making and power structures. This call to action is echoed in 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, particularly SDG Target 5.5, which underscores the need of women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. One of the areas that region identifies as a progress since Beijing in 1995 is the increase in women's political participation. However, this wants a deeper investigation and assessment, particularly from the realities of women, girls, adolescents, and gender-diverse people who experience never-ending cycles of poverty, discrimination, violence, injustice, conflicts, and many other interconnected crises. Strengthening women's participation and leadership should not merely target to achieve gender parity per se, but for genuine liberation and emancipation of women, girls, adolescents, and gender-diverse people. Women's rights to self-determination must be at the core of this discussion, starting from one's bodily autonomy and integrity to freely determine their political status and pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Let me be clear. We are not interested in talking about women's participation and leadership in the currently exploitative and oppressive system, as it will not only reproduce another oppressive domination, but also instrumentalize women further into those vicious systems. Therefore, it is not enough to emphasize how important it is to recognize patriarchy as a fundamental structural barrier to women's human rights, gender equality, and liberation. Just as affirmed by BPFA, actions for BPFA must be shaped to dismantle all aspects of patriarchy in our society and structures, from local governance to global institutions, and to transform political, economic, social, and cultural structures based on human rights, gender equality, justice, sustainable peace, and accountability.
We call on member states to support and foster diverse feminist movements, particularly by providing multi-year, core, direct, and flexible funding to exercise their right to self-determination and sovereign power. Resources must be directed to build collective capacity and leadership of women and their communities to chart out new political, economic, and social structures centered around people's dignity and the well-being of our planet. Repeal all laws and policies such as NGO registration laws that put not only significant restrictions to autonomous feminist movements organizing, but criminalize, target, and shut down women human rights defenders and their communities. Strengthen and protect national institutions for women and gender equality by elevating their political power and budget allocation. Military budgets must be significantly reduced and be redirected to social expenditure, especially for women, girls, adolescents, gender-diverse people, and other historically marginalized communities. It's time for us to act boldly, concretely, for a transformative, gender-just future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegates. I now invite the distinguished delegates of CEDAW Alliance, Menu Mama, and Afghan women civil society organizations. You have 3 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honor to talk about the critical issues today, women's participation and leadership. Across the region, we see inspiring women leading in fields ranging from business and politics to technology and climate change. Despite that undeniable contribution of women to society, women contribute to face systematic barriers in their pursuit of leadership at all levels, whether due to traditional norms, gender-based violence, or discriminatory laws and practices. The lack of access to quality education, along with the limited opportunities for empowerment and employment, significantly hinders women's ability to participation in decision-making. Increasing militarism and the authoritarianism in the region contributes to escalation of sexual and gender-based violence. As state sanctions, repression and instability create environments where such crimes are more prevalent and often go unpunished. While discussing women leadership, we mustn't treat all women as an uniform group. Indigenous women, women with disabilities, gender-diverse women, and women from rural communities often encounter additional social, economic, and cultural barriers that makes it harder to them to access to leadership positions. To address these challenges, we must adopt a more inclusive approach to women's leadership. First, policy reform must go beyond surface-level equality. The creation of more inclusive and gender-sensitive policy and framework is essential. Affirmative actions such as gender quotas in political leadership is critical for ensuring that women's voices are heard. However, this policy must be designed at an intersectional lens. Second, harmful social norms that restrict women's roles and opportunities are needed to challenge and transform. Third, investment in capacity building and mentorship programs is critical. Fourth is the elimination of gender-based violence. Finally, to implement this necessary measure, securing adequate financial resources is crucial, with gender-responsive budgeting being enforced across all sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Samoa Victim Support Group. You have 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
My name is Tanya Toiloa, the chairperson of Samoa Victim Support Group. I speak on behalf of 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the Asia-Pacific region, where women and girls in all their diversities have been deprived of the right to full, equal, and meaningful representation in all forms of decision-making. This right has not been respected in practice, violating women's rights to participate on equal terms with men, as well as creating a serious impediment to the realization of all their rights. In support of SDG 5, the leaders in the Pacific have made the commitment to advance women in leadership. Accordingly, one of the expected outcomes for the Pacific Platform for Action 2018-2030 is the full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership and decision-making. The revitalized Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration echoes this commitment. We must now move to the implementation of these regional commitments at the local level. It is crucial that initiatives take into account the local context. For the context of Samoa, the significance of our culture in our day-to-day lives and how it informs our national policies is an important consideration. Just as recentering Samoan Christian values of love, respect, dignity, and justice now informs our National Prevention and Protection Plan, Pathways to Leadership must recognize how our culture supports and contributes to women's pathways to leadership and, in particular, Parliament. Thus, local context is key. Without this consideration, initiatives will not be impactful, and advances made by women in the corporate and professional arena will not translate into increased political representation. On behalf of women and girls in Asia Pacific, we call on member states to remove all obstacles to women and girls' full, equal, and meaningful representation and participation in economic, social, cultural, political decision-making in both private and public spheres. It's time for us to act boldly, concretely, for a transformative, gender-just future. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Boundless Voices, Culture, People. You have 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Honorable delegates and esteemed members of the United Nations, I speak on behalf of the LGBTQIAP+ youth in Asia and the Pacific and 300 organizations from the CSO Forum in the region. Today, we, the LGBTQIAP+ youth of the Asia Pacific, stand before you not just as voices, but as catalysts for change. Our presence here is a milestone born of fire, resilience, and an unyielding demand for justice. We resist systemic oppression that shames and silences us from birth. In too many of our countries, anti-self-determination laws criminalize who we are, embedding fear into every aspect of our lives, our homes, schools, workplaces, private, public, and digital spaces. We resist the erasure of our histories. Our identities are not Western constructs, but integral to the rich, diverse cultures of this region. Colonization and patriarchy may have tried to strip us of our vocabularies, but we refuse to be erased. We reclaim our narratives. Our cultures are abundant with histories of gender diversity and queer love. Yet these stories remain buried, excluded from textbooks, media, and public memory. We demand their revival, the decolonization of our histories. We reclaim the power of grassroots community-led movements that have sustained us in the face of institutional neglect. These movements must be empowered with sustainable funding, decision-making authority in policy-making, and platforms to hold governments accountable. We demand educational reform to introduce LGBTQIAP+ inclusive curricula, authentic media representation, and collaboration with progressive faith leaders to dismantle harmful traditions. Transformation is our ultimate goal. Legal protections alone will not suffice. We demand a cultural shift that dismantles stigma and celebrates diversity. For us, it means intersectional advocacy, expanded GBV frameworks, and enhanced access to social protections and services, and support queer community members to lead this transformation. The transformation begins now with the choices we make in this room. Our message is clear. We resist the erasure of our lives. We reclaim our histories and futures, and we transform systems of oppression into structures that celebrate and uplift us. Thank you.
Although I see some speakers on the list, we must now end the discussion and take a lunch break. For delegations still wishing to make statements, please submit them in writing, and the Secretariat will post them on the meeting's website. I would like to thank the moderator, panelists, and delegates for their active participation. The meeting has now concluded its deliberations under agenda item 3B. This concludes our discussion of item 3B, entitled Strengthening Women's Participation and Leadership in Asia and the Pacific. We will continue with agenda 3C this afternoon. I would like to invite the secretary of the meeting to make housekeeping announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, during the lunch break today, from 12:30 to 1:45 p.m., we have 5 side events taking place. Please refer to the ESCAP meeting website on the side events page for the full schedule and room information. Side events are being held in meeting rooms A, G, and H on level 1, and in conference room 4 on level 1, and in the theater on the ground floor. Please enjoy your lunch and the side events. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Secretary. I ask all delegates to return to this meeting room promptly after the break, as we will resume our deliberation again at 1400 sharp to ensure the most efficient use of the time allocated to this meeting. This meeting is adjourned.